Good afternoon, good morning, a good evening if some of you are calling in from across the world. Hope you all are doing okay. Welcome to our user summit today. I just wanted to take a moment to say hello to everybody. And I see some familiar names in our audience and some not so familiar names. So welcome if you're new, and if you're not new, good to see you again. And sorry for my voice, it's a little hoarse. They told me you don't have to do this. And I said, nay, I will do this. Sorry, I worked on that joke already. I had to do it. But I've got Rob Mcmillan here with me as the co-host. And we are going to be taking turns sort of working with you to show you who we've got and who's on our team. And I apologize, I should be sharing my screen with you guys. And I will go ahead and pull up my PowerPoint presentation. I am very sorry. I thought it was pulled up. Technical difficulties.
Isn't that normal?
It's, yeah, just a little.
That's kind of what we exist for, is to solve technical difficulties, right? Correct.
I'm sorry, I downloaded this just a moment ago and it is not showing me anything. This is the most embarrassing thing ever.
I've seen worse, like a Super Bowl halftime.
Well, let me go and pull it up. I'm sure my face is super warm. I hit you off with a bad joke. And then, okay. So we'll go ahead and do this. And now I will share my screen. Okay. All right. So I've already given you the EstesGroup spiel before. Some of you are newer, so I'll let you know what we're up to. We're doing managed hosting. Some of you are managed hosting customers. We do ERP implementation, application consulting, business process reviews, ERP installations, ERP installations and tuning, and then those managed IT services, which are clearly not all listed here, but we do a lot: endpoint security, backup, disaster, remote worker support, and a plethora of other items. Let's go. All right, so today we have Rob Mcmillan, who you've already spoken with, and then me, of course. Rob is newer to the team. He's a project manager. Do you want to just say hello real quick, Rob?
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you'll see me over on the right side of your screen. So we have several individuals that are going to be presenting today. First is Daryl Sirota. Most of you that work with our managed services are familiar with Daryl. He's our Vice President Technology. He'll be talking with Chris Kopler, who's our Director of Sales, about our hosting and cloud. We also have Tingberg and Chris Robinson from Parttrap, who'll be doing a presentation on e-commerce, followed by Joe Trent, one of our senior consultants, who will be talking about BAQs and some of the development type work that we do and some tips on how to handle that. And then finally, we'll wrap up with Brad, who is our SVP of Professional Services. So what's our agenda?
So now, trying to move this, now that we've got our introductions out of the way, our agenda for today, we're going to have Chris and Daryl. I don't think you guys have seen Chris present in one of these summits, but he's awesome and newer to our team. 10 through 11 is cloud options for your E10 Kinetic application. 11 to 12, at Tenberg and Chris Robinson. Hey, Chris, leverage a virtual showroom to drive new product and spare parts through e-commerce. That's one of our top partners, Parttrap. They're great. 12 to 1, business activity query, fancy tips and nuanced tricks. Ooh, that sounds fancy, Joe Trent. 1 through 2, data management tool, managing data changes, and that's going to be with Brad Feeks. And I think all of you pretty much know Brad Feeks pretty well. All right. And Rob, do you want to share the webinar format, please?
Yeah, we've got some cool stuff to get. Right down at the bottom, I noticed immediately gift cards. Excellent. So we've got 4 sessions. Each will follow the same format. They'll be about 45 minutes long. We'll take a Q&A for about 10 minutes and then a short break to get away for those personal things that might come up. We'll also have some polls. In fact, we're going to have one in just a moment. And during the QA, we'd love to get your questions. So provide those. And also, if you can use the chat if you want to talk. So let's talk a little bit about the gift cards. There are going to be 4 of them given away. They're going to be randomly given. We'll do that after we finish today. We'll send those out. And those will be awarded to attendees who are stay with us to the end. So join us, stay with us, and listen closely. So before we jump into that first presentation, Cindy, what's our initial poll?
Okay, our initial poll is, how's your Epicor system currently deployed? Software as a service, on-premise, private cloud hosted. And I'll give you guys a few minutes to go over that.
Yeah, this leads into our first session where we'll be talking about what's, a little bit about the cloud and how Epicor and the cloud work well together.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and end the poll so we can jump into the next presentation and share these results. 11% SaaS, on-premise, 81% of you, excuse me, and then 8% private cloud hosted. Keep that up for a moment. And then next up, I'll go ahead and share our next screen. All right, we have Chris Kopler and Daryl Sirota. Chris Kopler is the Director of Sales, Infrastructure, and IT Services Division at EstesGroup. Chris has more than 10 years working in customer service and sales and specializes in helping customers understand their technology needs and matching them with tailored solution packages. And Daryl, as most of you know, is the Vice President of Technology at EstesGroup and leads our technical team. Daryl has over 35 years of IT experience, and works to build and maintain the server architectures that serve as the foundation to our Echo managed hosting platform. So if you will take it away, Chris and Daryl.
Thanks, Cindy. So I am going to be talking really kind of about your cloud options, which is a huge part of kind of what I do over here at Estes. And I spend, I would say, most of my days running through what's the best solution for the customer, what issues are you running into. Did my screen come up okay? Perfect. So it's really about kind of understanding your options for cloud and everything that entails. And so one of the big things is general considerations for your environment, which is how are you guys configured today? How are you guys configured today? How are you guys currently leveraging your system? And it really comes down to a couple of factors as far as the application or what you guys are doing today for your backend systems. So one of those are key business drivers such as functionality and capabilities, flexibility, scalability, and customization, access control, integration needs. The next section can really be broken out as cost, which is a huge consideration, especially with the poll that you guys all voted on, that most of you are on-prem. It comes down to capital expense versus an operation expense. So if you're doing a capital expense, you're probably used to your on-prem environment. And then looking at kind of the cloud or SaaS option is definitely more of an operating expense. So it comes down to each business of what's going to fit their business model the best. A fixed cost or kind of a variable cost, depending on how you guys are structured. Another huge consideration with cost, which we see very much with cloud solutions, especially primarily in the Azure environment, is Ingress and Egress costs. So when you're transferring data in or out, it can definitely add to those additional costs, which might not be best for your business, depending on how you are configured. And then really kind of the last consideration for your cloud ERP options are data center requirements. Not all data centers are created equal. A lot of people talk about the big three, which is considered AWS, Azure, and then if you have any private data centers out there. So one of the big questions that I discuss with a lot of businesses, whether we're talking about or any Epicor product and whether cloud is a good fit for your business, is what are your compliance requirements? If you're in the manufacturing space, do you have to be CMMC compliant, NIST 800 because of the contracts that you have for those manufacturing lines of business? The other piece to consider when you're looking at data center requirements is reliability and uptime SLAs. I would say that the last component is really performance requirements, which are pretty standardized across the industry when you're looking kind of at cloud environments. And that's where you get into really the different options when it comes to the solution sets out there. So there's primarily SaaS, there is infrastructure as a service, and there's really PaaS. So we'll discuss kind of software as a service first. So this is really kind of your subscription model, ERP application basis, Salesforce, the E10 application can be cloud hosted or SaaS hosted, as well as P21. So it pretty much means that you are purchasing monthly. Sometimes you can pay that in an annual fee, but you're basically purchasing the software and your costs are as they are consumed. One of the big issues when you start looking at a SaaS solution, especially with the Epicor products, is you're kind of in a shared tenant, generally speaking, when you're looking at SaaS. So you might have restricted access to your SQL tables, to APIs, any type of integrations or connections that you might have had in an on-premise model might not directly transfer over to a SaaS application. So it's great for customers who don't own hardware and they don't want to have that capital expense. They have limited IT staff. Sometimes SaaS will be a great fit for that. Or you might just be getting into the ERP space and you don't necessarily have a lot of third-party integrations or customization. SaaS is definitely a decent fit. Now, with that, I will say SaaS can also have its troubles. If you are an established business and you are looking to do a on-prem refresh of hardware and have that capital expense, but you're also looking at your cloud options, SaaS doesn't necessarily integrate very well with people that have an established business model because you have restricted access when you go to the SaaS solution with all of your information. So it can break your APIs, your third-party integrations, and there's a lot of upfront work. Being in this space, I've worked with several customers where they went to the SaaS model for some of the Epicor products, and it ended up being over almost 10 months of integration, and they still don't actually have a live environment. So SaaS is great for certain businesses, but it's also very restrictive for others. So the next kind of solution of how Epicor is deployed is really an on-premise install. Sounds like most of you are familiar with that here. Basically, you own your hardware. Generally, what I see from speaking with customers is they'll purchase a server. They usually do the expense over 5 years. So they'll do a 3-year next business day warranty on a new purchase, and then they'll usually do a 2 or 3 year extension. That's pretty common for the on-premise portion. Basically, you own your licenses and you own all of that cost. So it's great for people that have internal IT and those expertise in-house. It definitely works. I would say that when you're looking at on-prem kind of versus the SaaS solution, SaaS definitely has scalability and flexibility, probably a little bit more reliable unless you have a very extensive on-prem network, including backups, a DRaaS solution, all of that functionality. One sec. Perfect. So next is really your private cloud or infrastructure as a service. I would say that this is a big area where I spend a lot of my time talking to customers, whether it's with the Epicor product in E10 or Kinetic, or you're looking at P21 on the flip side. So infrastructure as a service is basically we stand up the resources and allow you to have kind of that platform, and you manage it from the application to the patch management to the hardware. Kind of the ball's in your court once the environment stood up. So it's a great fit because it keeps your costs down, and it's much more comparable to on-prem from a pricing standpoint if you're looking at ROIs. So pretty much you're responsible for the entire administration of the application and the infrastructure. But generally, when we set up infrastructure as a service, we're still there on the back end. So if you need additional assistance, you can still submit tickets through us, and you still have the support. It's just all billable at that point. So it's great for customers that don't necessarily want to stay on-prem. Infrastructure as a service works great for multi-site locations. So you don't have a single point of failure like an on-prem environment. So those are the advantage of infrastructure as a service. As long as you have a good internet connection at your facilities, this is definitely a great option. So then we move into PaaS, so platform as a service. This is basically infrastructure as a service. We stand up the application, but then we manage all of the hardware and all of the infrastructure that goes with that. It's great for customers that are have IT departments where they don't have enough time to complete all the projects that they currently want. They want to offload some of that work. It uses the same thing, perpetual license model, so the ERP application license separate from the rest of the platform, but it basically allows companies to convert their hardware and data center costs into operating expenses. It's also great for scalability. It allows that multi-site environment to really function well. So you don't have to manage the hardware. You basically are responsible for the application. We can still assist with that and still have that functionality. But this is, I would say, where I probably spend 60% of my conversations is talking about with our customers or prospects, private cloud PaaS or infrastructure as a service seem to be a great fit. It's very similar to the on-prem environment. You have all of the functionality. You have full access for APIs, integrations, VPNs, anything that you need in the environment, you pretty much have access to. So it mirrors pretty much an on-prem environment. It's now just up in the cloud, and you have not a single point of failure moving forward. So this is basically kind of a responsibility matrix or outlay of from on-premise all the way up to software as a service. So I really end up playing in that middle space because that's what really fits well. For most customers that we end up talking to is they're looking to offload, whether it's a portion or all of it, as far as some of those system and hosting requirements. And so this is kind of how it scales. So I mentioned at the beginning that not all data centers are created equal. I come from a background where I actually used to work with a distributor, cloud distributor. So I am very familiar with the AWS and Azure platforms. They're not terrible options. Everyone has their unique hurdles and challenges when it comes to cloud. These are some of the highlights about working with a private data center provider. It's not actually our hardware. We work and leverage a company called US Signal. So we're very transparent about who we host with. But they've got 8 data centers. They sit on private fiber between all 8 data centers. So you actually have access to 2 data centers when you host a solution with us. So you have that functionality and failover capability in case there is an event at the primary data center. It's also the only private cloud or public cloud that I've ever seen that will write a guaranteed 100% SLA on the hardware, meaning that they will literally put it in writing that you will not go down to hardware requirements. They also have a lot of compliances that they check off: HIPAA, SOC 1, 2, PCI, FBI, CGIS, which is a very rare cert. You don't find that at a lot of data centers. NIST 800, GDRP, ITAR, and they are currently in the process of CMMC certifications right now. Everyone kind of in the data center world is running through that as there are not enough auditors. So they have done the self-audit and they are already NIST 800. So it's basically that compliance, just one more level. They also have 24/7 by 365 NOC, and you will get a guaranteed engineer on the line when you call within 60 seconds. So this is huge from a support standpoint. If you've ever worked with any of the other cloud providers, such as Microsoft or AWS, you definitely can run into the issue of not being able to get somebody on the phone when you need them. And so it's a great solution. And whether you're infrastructure as a service or PaaS with Estes, you still can have access to that layer of support. Another reason why we end up going with that data center provider is it's very key when you pick a partner of where your data center is located. Generally speaking, they try to put them out of natural disaster areas. The next slide is where the actual data centers reside. So like you said, 8 geodiverse data centers. They are running Cisco clusters. So they get audited 6 times annually in order to hold their Cisco certification. But like I said, this is how they do that 100% SLA. They've got 8 data centers. They sit on private fiber between all 8 data centers. So they do not have to go over public lines to stand you up in the failover data center if required. So as I mentioned earlier, they are Cisco certified, but basically we can do everything from any type of infrastructure or Hyper-V we can pretty much move from over to our infrastructure as a service or platform as a service. And here is some of the additional offerings that our partner also offers. So they are a Veeam partner. That's primarily what they use for backup, but they have backup as a service, they have DRaaS as a service, and they can also do managed backups. Probably the most unique thing that I think that's worth speaking about here is their DRaaS solution, or disaster recovery as a service, is probably one of the most affordable that I've seen in the market. Generally, when you're looking at your infrastructure and we're kind of discussing what's right for your business, a lot of larger companies will start to implement a disaster recovery solution. And usually when you design that, you have to pay for your resources to have that failover depending on what your RTO is. Specifically with US Signal, you just pay for the actual storage. You do not pay for any additional resources for CPU, RAM, etc. So it's very affordable when you're looking for that as an option. Their DRaaS solution also comes with air-gapped backups, which if you're looking at how do you reduce ransomware, that's one of the key pieces. If you have a disaster recovery solution, it's one step better than backup, because as they replicate to an alternate data center for the DRaaS solution, they change the files from a bootable file to something that cannot be booted up or read. And so it allows ransomware not to get in. Even if it gets into the data center, it does not see it as a file that it can actually ransomware. So that's probably one of the biggest things that I have been discussing with most of our customers, is kind of what does that look like cost-wise, and is it the right fit for your organization? They also do professional services for data transfers. So we try to make it ridiculously easy over here at the EstesGroup of how you migrate. So generally speaking, unless you are doing a pickup, lift, and move from an on-prem solution to cloud, there are no migration costs. If you are doing a Sirota replication, so you're basically picking up all of your on-prem data and you're not configuring new servers, they have a professional service department that can assist you with that, so they can do the heavy lifting for you. So as I was mentioning earlier, we can do everything from migration of servers from VMware, Hyper-V, XN server hypervisors. We can also do all Windows, Linux, almost any OS, but basically both physical and virtual environments. So it's pretty much a white glove experience from start to finish. So if you don't have the internal staff, and that might be one of the reasons why you haven't looked at cloud, it's definitely worth taking another look. Oh. And that is where I'm going to turn it over to Daryl Sirota, which I'm sure you are all familiar with.
Well, I thank you, Chris. Appreciate the fine introduction. Greetings, everyone. My name, as implied, is stated, is Daryl. I'm the VP of Technology here at the EstesGroup. Been doing fun cloud stuff for way too many years, and I wanted to share with you some of the high-level benefits of moving to a cloud environment if you're not already, and some of the pros and cons, and regardless of whether you're moving to a private cloud or a public cloud or something in between there's a lot of different options and some things that you want to keep your eye on to make sure that your servers are running as efficient as possible. So with that, I'm going to go ahead here and share out a little bit of detail. I'm trying not to make this a death by PowerPoint. So if you have any questions as I go along, please feel free to post them in the chat. I am monitoring it over here on another monitor. So if I glance over here occasionally, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's because I'm making sure that there's no questions here in the chat. But feel free to use the chat window or the Q&A window to ask any questions as you have them. Okay, so first thing, keep in mind that cloud is not a magic term. It really just means somebody else's computer. So when you look at a cloud environment, keep in mind that it's still probably Intel processors running a Windows operating system with the same IIS and SQL and bits that are running underneath. In fact, if you're running on-prem, as 81% of you are, those same functions and requirements apply to the cloud solution. So this isn't some magic solution that all of your problems are transported to the cloud and you don't have to worry about them, but rather those solutions are transported, moved, copied, sometimes upgraded into somebody else's computer. So when we look at the different cloud environments or the architectures, there's two primary architectures that we kind of split things in. There's a dedicated architecture, and this is where the resources that you are consuming are dedicated to you. So in some cases, that's a dedicated operating system, dedicated SQL, dedicated firewall, network pipe, and all of those things. And in many cases, that dedicated environment gives you that consistent interface, the consistent performance that some clients are looking for. On the other side, you might decide that cost savings are more important. And what we can do is look at a shared tenant environment. And this is where we share some of the infrastructure, maybe a common network pipe, a common Active Directory structure, common SQL servers, although SQL instances are dedicated to each of our clients. But basically what this allows us to do is lower the cost so that we can bring a more cost-effective solution to you, and it does help minimize some of the overhead requirements. And regardless of whether you're on a dedicated environment or a shared tenant environment, there's a couple of different ways to look at this. So the first one is where most of you probably are now, and that is what I call the on-premise cloud. Really, this is you're running on your own hardware. It's you're running some type of a hypervisor. So most folks are running VMware. Some folks are running Hyper-V. There are some other virtualization platforms out there. But as soon as you go to that level of virtualization, you could spin up new servers and add memory and add disk and do all of these things relatively easily until, of course, you run out of memory or run out of disk space, and then you have to go hurry up and buy some more. And essentially what you end up doing is owning that environment, right? So you own, purchase, and own and repair the hardware, the configuration, all of the servers, the licenses for the Windows and the SQL and the terminal servers and everything, and Epicore, and you own the application, right? So it's basically your on-prem environment. It's just a private cloud or on-premise cloud as it's often referred to. And of course, that's a dedicated environment. Presumably your on-premise private cloud environment is dedicated to just Epicore. Well, probably not. If some of you folks run on-prem servers with Epicore, you probably have it sharing with a little bit of Exchange, maybe a little bit of SharePoint, a couple of domain controllers over there in another virtual world. So the reality is that even if you run your own on-premise cloud, it's not likely dedicated to the Epicor application, but rather it's sharing, because you spent a lot of money on that SAN, it's sharing it with other on-premise file servers, SQL servers, print servers, et cetera, et cetera. And so that way the private cloud environment actually turns into a shared tenant, even though it's all just you, but you're sharing it with those other functions. So then when we look at the private cloud environment, the infrastructure and as a service, platform as a service, and our managed hosting, these kind of mishmash together into a private cloud solution that Chris was referring to earlier. And this really basically is where you don't own the hardware anymore, but rather you take all of those functions, whether you're just renting CPUs and RAM in the infrastructure as a service, or you go through the whole managed hosting environment where not only do we help you with the operating system and the SQL application and the Epicor install and running all of the stuff that you run on top of Epicor, all those third-party plugins, et cetera. That all is running in our data center rather than sitting in your so I'm gonna say server closet. So I know some of you do have server closets. I've seen them, but most of the folks that are in the enterprise class, you have a server room that you get to pay to power, and you get to pay to cool, and you get to pay to repair. So all of those benefits come with the outsourcing all of that cloud environment to a hosting provider such as EstesGroup. Lastly, of course, we do have the public cloud environment. This is kind of the ultimate in shared tenancy. And this is where you have the SaaS solution or software as a service, where basically all you do is you purchase per seat licensing. And you really don't have a say in where your data lives or who else is playing along for the ride. You're operating in a big shared environment. And for example, Microsoft Office 365 is a classic example of software as a service. So as you run your email in Office 365, you've got you don't know where your mail server is, and unless you're in the government organization, you have to keep it within the US borders. You don't know, nor do you really care when they upgrade Exchange servers or move your mailbox from point A to point B. So these are all different benefits of using somebody else's computer. So let's look a little bit more in detail now what it takes to run, in fact, the Kinetic Epicor environment in that cloud solution, regardless of which cloud solution you pick. So we have a couple of characteristics. First off, you will note that Epicor has always supported a specific platform. Operating system and SQLs are matched together, and you can't just pick willy-nilly and expect Epicor to support you. So you can run Server 2012 R2, no more 2008. With SQL 2017, no more SQL 16. Or Server 16 with SQL 17, or you can even go up to Windows Server 19. Yay, that's supported. Server 22 is not yet supported. So for those of you on the bleeding edge of Microsoft operating systems, hold off. Windows 11 isn't supported either. So just cool your jets if you're trying to go to that. SQL 19 is only supported with Server 19. So those are some of the supported stacks that the 3 supported stacks that Epicor will support you on as you move to Kinetic. Of course, it requires the .NET 4.8 framework. This is usually not an issue unless you're forgot to install it on all your workstations. Most Windows 10 machines now have that patched up, and they're not an issue. You do require SQL reporting services. Now, a SQL reporting services, when they move to SQL 17, is a separate download, and it can use the same license key as your SQL engine. However, you have to keep in mind that there's some licensing nuances, which I'll get to in another slide here. But SQL reporting services, separate download, got to have your license key, and that's kind of cool. But that's it's got some caveats, as again I'll discuss shortly. You also need SQL full text search. Not a big deal, but if you want your Epicor search to work properly, then SQL full text search has to be turned on. It's just a bit you flip. There's no extra money for that SQL full text search functionality. So once you get those server requirements together, then we move on to the SQL licensing. So Microsoft, of course, their SQL licensing is either a SQL 2017 or SQL 2019 standard or enterprise edition licenses. So the standard edition is the less expensive of the two, obviously, but it does have some limitations. For example, it cannot do online index rebuilds. And you might say, well, who cares about that, right? Online, you just do offline index rebuilds. Sure, if you want to do an offline index rebuild with SQL Standard Edition, then stop your task agent, kick all your users out, shut down the Epicor application server, and then you can do your full index rebuilds, which is a kind of a showstopper if you're a 24/7 shop. And most folks run MRPs and things like that in the middle of the night. So you don't want to shut down your SQL server just so that you can get this re-index done. Also, in the enterprise edition, they have multiple databases in this thing called an always-on availability group. It's one of the high availability features that Microsoft built into the SQL product. With SQL Standard Edition, you get one database per availability group. That means you can build a cluster and you have your database living on server A. And if something happens to server A, then the database fails over server B. Now, users do get a service interruption. They'll get an error message. SQL stops on one, it starts on the other. but your database comes back online usually within a minute. And that's one way that you can achieve high availability without spending a whole lot of money. The problem is that Epicor solutions often involve more than one database. And so you want to have not only your production database, but your search database and your bartender database and your e-commerce database. All those you probably fail over as a chunk rather than one off. So that's where Enterprise Edition comes in handy. And then there's another huge benefit of Enterprise Edition, and that is those always on availability groups are available to be read only. So you can actually run your SSRS reporting off of a separate SQL instance than running SSRS off of your production instance. And what that does is it improves performance, it splits the IO. There's a lot of benefits to splitting your data processing from your decision support in a high transactional environment. SQL is licensed. You have to have a minimum of 4 cores, even in the virtual environment, and you bump them by 2 core packs. So I have seen clients where they want to make it go faster. So they start adding CPUs to the SQL server. And the technicians will do that because it's easy to go into a virtualized world and just add another CPU, add another CPU. Did it go faster? If it didn't go faster, they don't often take the CPUs away. And that creates a headache when it comes to the licensing guys, because they'll look at that and every 2 cores requires another license pack. And in the Enterprise Edition SQL world, that's a 4 or 5 figure number depending on your licensing agreement. So just simply licensing SQL to do your job could be a significant chunk of change. Now, one thing that also is catches some folks is they'll install the SQL engine on one server and they'll install SSRS on another server. Those 2 functions, when they're on the same server, can piggyback on the same license. So you buy a 4-core license of SQL and you can run the engine and SSRS on the same OS. But if you split them apart because you want to get better performance or higher availability, etc., now this server requires 4 cores and that server requires 4 core licenses. So you've just doubled your licensing costs by splitting the 2 servers into splitting those functions into 2 separate servers. So keep in mind that that can be a challenge. You must license the number of processors that are presented to SQL. So you can't present 12 processors to SQL and say, I want to give 4 to the engine and I want to give 4 to SSRS and I want 4 for it to be able to run, I don't know, my backups, something like that. That's Microsoft looks at the number of processors that are presented. We call them cores or processors kind of interchangeably. And whatever's presented to SQL, that's what the licensing experts are going to come down to your door and go, show me your licenses, because you have to make sure you're obviously in license compliance with Microsoft. One of the nice things about SQL is it's always offered additional instances on the same VM. So if you wanted to have a production SQL Server instance on one machine and on that same box install a separate instance for your test environment, that's legit, and you can do that without paying Microsoft extra money. However, Microsoft did the industry a disservice, in my humble opinion, in that starting with SQL 2017, SSRS can no longer be multi-instance on the same operating system. That means you can only install one SSRS. There's only one engine that's running your reports. If you're running reports in production and test on the same server, you're running that all in the same SSRS instance. And that could potentially let test environment impact the production environment. And some of the folks out there are very, very much purists when it comes to splitting testing from production. So if you're going to absolutely split testing from production, you're going to have 2 separate SQL servers, one running the production engine, production SSRS, and a completely other box that's running the test engine and the test SSRS. So those are some benefits that you have. And just want to keep in mind that the SQL licensing is certainly going to be a factor as we look at that. Okay, remote desktop, similar animal here. If you're running terminal servers and in the cloud environment, you're most likely going to be moving, you've either got terminal servers there and we'll be migrating those functions into, and that terminal services into the cloud environment, or you're working really hard to get away from the terminal services environment and you look at this new thing called Kinetic and go, wow, Kinetic has a web UI. and we can go through and we can eliminate or minimize the use of terminal services by moving to the web UI. And this is true in not only the E10 environment, but also the Kinetic environment. And for those folks running Prophet 21, same scenario. Epicor is pushing folks fast and furious to the web environment. The benefit there is you don't need terminal servers, which is great because terminal servers, they're big bad servers. If you're running more than 40 or 50 users, you're probably going to need more than one terminal server, and that's a terminal server farm. And every one of those users needs their own license. So you need to purchase your own license, or if you host it in our cloud environment, we have a service provider license, and basically you can rent that terminal server license on a monthly basis. Same thing true with the Sql licenses, by the way. You basically rent them month to month as needed, and that's where you can increase or potentially decrease your usage of licenses without having a big cash outlay. Another benefit of going to the cloud environment. So when you go to the web access, again, it simply uses IIS, and it doesn't need any separate licensing. So you can have license the operating system, and then of course you're going to license Epicor, the application, but you're not going to have to license Sql, but you're going to not have to run the RDP farm with RDP licenses. So lots of benefits and options there, whether you're running the pure Kinetic interface from the web browser. Kinetic still supports what they call classic web access and classic mobile access. These are browser interfaces, scaled down, not as pretty, not as functional, but that's what's kind of a legacy environment. And then the Prophet 21 environment with their web UI looks very different than the legacy client, but available and simpler to deploy. When you take that smart client or the Epicor fat client, smart client, legacy client, classic client, call it what you will, and you install it locally on a PC at your environment, instead of using terminal services, what you might find is that you're going to introduce some networking bottlenecks. That is, you're moving a lot of the data across the VPN tunnel from the cloud environment down to your on-premise environment. Instead of a terminal server or a web client that's designed to be light, it's designed to be internet friendly. The smart client install will bring down all of your customers when you query a list of all your customers. It'll bring down all of the orders or all of the ship tos down to your workstation rather than the subset, or in the case of terminal services, just the screen images or the keystrokes necessary to support the terminal server environment. So as you can probably see, there's a lot of questions, and a lot of concerns, a lot of potential issues that are brought up when we decide, do you want to do RDP or do you want to do the new web UI environment? And a lot of clients actually have a mix and match, especially as we move into the Kinetic world where the web Kinetic interface is more robust than the old classic web interface. You might have some users that are comfortable in the web UI and some folks that still need that legacy smart client experience. So you'll have some mix and match depending on your audience. Okay, no questions so far, so I'm going to ramble on here. Of course, ERP performance is important. You need to make sure that whatever systems you stand up, that you have sufficient resources, right? CPU, memory, disk, and network performance is critical to any server. So whether it's your Sql server, your Kinetic application server, the terminal server, the remote desktop servers that you're running, do keep in mind that the Kinetic UI, if you are running it on a terminal server environment, uses more RAM. So for folks that are starting to use the Kinetic interface, even in E10, you will see that that terminal server or even the smart client installed on the workstation does use a little bit more RAM. And so keep that in mind. If you're planning to upgrade from E10 to Kinetic, your terminal servers will probably need a corresponding memory upgrade. So when you look at that ERP performance, a lot of folks, when I ask this question, well, how's your ERP performing today? What they'll do is they'll go to the application server and they'll pop up Task Manager. If they're advanced, they'll look at Resource Manager. If they're super advanced, they'll look at Performance Monitor, and they'll go, well, CPU is sitting at about 15%, so I don't have a CPU bottleneck. And that's might be okay for that split second that you're looking at Performance Monitor or Task Manager. But the reality is that your ERP performance is more than just a snapshot of the 60 seconds that Task Manager gives you. It's a longer term trend, right? Is your ERP system slower at 9 o'clock in the morning when the doors open and everybody rushes in to buy stuff? Is it slower at lunchtime when people are trying to get all their work done before they go out to lunch? Is it super fast on the weekends because there's nobody there? So these are the types of questions that we can look at with a longer term trending tool. So Performance Monitor does have those trend where you can monitor for more than 60 seconds or a couple of minutes. But it takes a fairly advanced engineer to go into Performance Monitor and look at the counters, the functions that you're interested in watching over that long-term trend. So you can use Performance Monitor. We here at the Estes Group, we prefer to use third-party tools because third-party tools really provide a much deeper insight into how is your server feeling, not only today, not only at this moment, but over the course of a month or 2 months. So as you add users or change a module or move from the RDP interface to the web interface, we can see what the impact is on those CPU, memory, network, and disk channels to make sure that we're not going to bottleneck anything and that we can appropriately scale the solution. So third-party tools, lots of great tools there. I'll show you a couple of screenshots as we go down. But you have to make sure that, of course, you don't want an ERP that performs slower than it does today, right? And we see this a lot when we look at cloud migrations. A client will say, I have to make it go faster. And so what we'll do is we'll monitor your on-prem solution, if that makes sense. And we'll make sure that, the time to get a customer is equal to or better than your on-prem solution. The cloud solution is equal to or better than your on-prem solution. So Sql Performance. So for your bit brains out there, the Sql engineers, you're probably familiar with some of this. I don't want to dive into lots of details, but the SQL Server is the core of any ERP system. Whether it's Kinetic or whether it's P21 or there's lots of other ERP systems out there. And if they're using SQL as their backend, most of them do, index maintenance, making sure that concurrent activities are kept to a minimum. You don't want to be running big MRP runs in the middle of the day when users are trying to do new data entry. Or if you have to do an MRP run, ask Brad, he can tell you how to do like a minimal ERP run to get the orders done, the ordering done that you need, and not just a full MRP run. There's two great tools out there that I wanted to share with you. Brent Ozar is I haven't had the pleasure of meeting this gentleman, but he does a great SQL dive and creates this thing called a check, a blitz check, excuse me. The blitz check, it simply is a sanity check of your SQL server, whether your SQL server is on-prem or it's in your private cloud. You can't do it in the SaaS environment because they don't let you at the SQL server. But Brent Ozar will come along and say, hey, did you know that you haven't done a backup of this database in 6 months? Some people look at that and go, well, that's crazy because I thought I was backing up nightly. When you might have some databases. It does one of those. It's like 500 different checks just to make sure that your SQL servers, you're just not going insane with stupid user tricks. And I've seen plenty of stupid user tricks on SQL servers. If you're willing to spend a little bit of money on some monitoring for SQL, Quest software makes a Spotlight.io monitoring tool that will show you everything that you want to know about your SQL server and more, as well as suggestions to make it go faster. So SQL Performance, certainly one of the things that we spend a lot of time on in the Echo hosting environment. So when we look at the ERP environment, of course, security comes paramount. I've beaten this drum time and again, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this slide, short of the fact that if you decide not to decide on any one of these factors, then you've already decided that you're going to ignore it. So that if you don't look at account management, for example, then when one of your folks leaves the company and you forgot to disable their account, or they walked out the door knowing the ERP service account or your Epicor manager account. Account management is kind of critical to make sure that you don't have bad people, usually ex-employees, playing in. Of course, we all know what the default Epicor password is, right? Manager. I still see clients running the manager username with the manager password. And I just trying to shake my head. I tell them, go, you can't do this, because every person in the world, even that new hire that's walking in the door who ran Epicor in the last shop, they know manager. So account management, absolutely critical. So one of the big things we see in the cloud space is that disaster recovery, being able to define your recovery time objective and your recovery point objective. These are two critical acronyms that, if you're not familiar with, catch me during open question time, I'll tell you more about them. But one of the biggest challenges in a small environment is that here's your Epicor server, it's running, yeah, you do a backup, but have you ever done a full disaster recovery of your on-prem environment? That is, you came in the office one day and the server is a smoking crater in the ground, and nobody's in Epicor because the servers, got little curls of smoke going up. How long is it going to take you to get Epicor back and running so that you can produce products? If it takes less than, if you've never done that test, and it takes less than 3 days, you're doing good. Now, I don't know about you, but most folks don't like to be down for 3 days. So the disaster recovery aspect of our hosting environment really is kind of top notch. And that is one of the key factors in moving to a mature environment where you can click a button and know that your data is now running 50 miles away in another data center. And we can put our money where our mouth is, and we actually offer 2 free fire drills a year in that failover environment. So it's not just setting it up and pretending that's work, it's we prove it. Okay, so when we look at this, our preferred data center, if you will, this is our high-level snapshot of 2 data centers. Virtual data center 1 is on one power grid, the Western power grid, and the other data centers on the Eastern power grid. So, if heaven forbid New York goes out, the other data center is still running. And so these are a high-level picture of what the data centers, if it were, look like, so that when you purchase the Estes Cloud hosting environment or infrastructure as a service, these are the options that are immediately available to you. And Chris went over some of the details on that. So with that, we really want to make sure that as you do monitoring and you're watching your Epicor, I just grabbed a couple of screenshots. These are 2 of the dashboards that my team looks at all day long to see which one's red, which one's orange, and where's the green. And this monitors not only CPU and network and disk, but it also measures things like patch management, antivirus updates, software updates, and things like that. So without going into any of the details on the dashboards, if you don't have a dashboard on your Epicor system, chances are you're kind of running blind. So I want to make sure that if necessary, we can put these kind of eyeballs on your servers. If you choose to stay on-prem, we can put these eyeballs in Azure, or we can put them up in our cloud environment as well. So with that, I am going to say thanks so much for the time. I did go over a little bit, so I'm going to open the door for a couple of questions here and give a chance for a little bit of break here. So, questions. The first question is, I have a full IT staff and plan on keeping them. Can we manage the app server in a hosted environment? Absolutely. And we see that a lot for those folks that are doing infrastructure as a service. You want to keep your IT staff, you just don't want to keep your servers, by all means. And that's really where the infrastructure, you just put your servers up in the cloud and your staff has complete access, administrative access to those boxes. You just have a different IP address, that's all. Okay.
Hey, and Daryl, we had
yes.
an incoming question that I wanted to make sure we answered live. We have a recording of this. I think it will. Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought it wasn't a question. I'm sorry. Ignore me.
That's okay. So that was one question. Let's see. Several third-party integrations through ODBC. Will they work in a private cloud? Yes, they will. I say it like that because ODBC is not a great solution because it's old technology. But yes, if you got Excel spreadsheets and homegrown code that runs over ODBC drivers, You can absolutely run it with integrated Windows authentication, or you can run it with standard SQL authentication. But most of our clients, hosted clients, still run ODBC. As much as I tell them to get out of that ODBC world, it's legacy and it's been out there for a long time. So absolutely, ODBC still works.
Daryl, this has really been great. I've learned a lot just watching it, and having worked with Epicor in the past as an IT director, it's great information for me too, particularly about all the new versions and requirements there. Thanks for sharing all of that.
Absolutely. So if there's any other questions, go ahead and post them. I'm going to give you guys a chance for that bio break because that was bad of me. I ran 5 minutes over. So sorry for that.
Okay.
Appreciate all your questions, and I'll be here throughout the presentation and during other break times as well. So thanks so much for your time, and we'll be seeing you on the other side.
All right. So we have a break now, and this will be for what, a couple more minutes, Cindy?
Yes, and so I just wanted to let the gentleman who sent in a question a moment ago, we will be answering that as one of the first questions when we do the roundtable at the end. I have not forgotten about you, so and thank you for the compliment as well. So okay, break time, and I think we're going to do a poll. Yeah.
Yes, we are.
All right.
So this one is a poll about e-commerce. We're curious about how many of you might be using e-commerce today and want to get your insights. So please jump in and answer. We'd appreciate your thoughts on this.
And we can share those results quickly when we get back. So if you're done and you want to take a quick trip to the coffee machine, the restroom, stretch your legs, jumping jacks, whatever you want, it's your world.
And we'll be back at 11 o'clock, which is 4 minutes from now. So see you then.
Okay, Rob, I've just ended the polling. I'm going to share those results if you would like to go over any of those, and then we can go into our next session and you can introduce those folks.
All right, looks like we have about 17% of our listeners and attendees that currently have their e-commerce website integrated. Certainly selling spare parts is a very profitable part of the business. And so we'll be talking about that in our next session, as is warranty. So let's get started with our next presentation. In this second presentation, we'll be hearing from our strategic partner for e-commerce, and that partner is Parttrap. And we've been working closely with them for several reasons. One, of course, is their strong e-commerce skills. They just have an amazing product. And second is their commitment and experience with Epicore. So from Parttrap, we have Chris Robinson and Uwe Teinberg presenting on the topic of leveraging a virtual showroom to drive new product and spare part sales through e-commerce. Now, let me give you some background on our two presenters. Uwe has been the CEO at Parttrap since 1994. That is a significant amount of experience. Uwe has been focused on helping manufacturers and distributors extend their B2B and B2C reach, and helps take the intricacies of complex products and make them more accessible to the broader marketplace. And they do this through their integrated e-commerce solutions. Also with Uwe is Chris Robinson. Chris is the Director of North America Strategic Partnerships at Parttrap, and he has more than 30 years experience in software sales, helping connect companies with software solutions. And so with that, let me turn it over to Chris and Uwe, and they can begin to talk a little bit about the e-commerce challenges and solutions that are available.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for that very nice introduction. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can. Looks great.
Yes.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Thanks. Well, fantastic. Well, again, this is Chris Robinson, and I reside in the great state of New Jersey. I hope you all can come and visit us sometime, and I want to thank you for a few minutes of your time today. Uwe and I hope to present a very interesting, educational, and compelling story here around Parttrap ONE. So Parttrap, we're an Epicor ISV, and we partner with really outstanding organizations like EstesGroup and the team to present a fully integrated solution, Epicor solution, for companies who are really interested in selling more product, providing more information about their product. And that's our objective here today, to help you tell a better story about the products and services that you sell. So as you see, here's our agenda. We'll go through this very quickly, and I promise you we're going to spend a lot of time seeing live demo Parttrap and the value that it has given our many North American and global Epicor customers. So we've already gone through the survey, and I appreciate those who responded. It sounds like many of you will have a great fit for what we do. So a little bit about Parttrap. We've been around for close to 25 years. We are a global company. Out of the box, we're going to have multi-currency, multilingual capabilities for those of you who are looking to expand your global reach and personalize your story and your products to the specific markets and currencies that you engage with. Our focus is really manufacturing and distribution companies and we work in both primarily the B2B market, but we also have many manufacturers who also sell B2C and use Parttrap to expand their reach of their products and revenue. You also see in the bottom left there B2B, B2X. That is our dealer portal. It's our understanding that a number of you on the call today do manufacture or distribute a product but you also sell through a channel of value-added dealers and or distributors. And we believe we have a pretty good solution that we can share with you today. So a little bit about Parttrap ONE, how we're somewhat different from, say, other products on the market. We can be on-prem or we can be in the cloud. Our license can be either a SaaS model, software as a service model, as you've heard in the previous outstanding presentations from EstesGroup today, or a perpetual license. Although today, most of our customers are going in the SaaS model and in the cloud. Out of the box, Parttrap includes, as mentioned, a full real-time integration with Epicore, to include even if Epicore goes down at the back end, which hopefully will not happen when you're being supported by EstesGroup. But if, God forbid, it does, you can continue to take orders and grab information through your website. And once Epicore comes back up, it's a full replication included in this. So it's real-time integration, as you'll see, with the products, the pricing, inventory availability. But also, we include CMS, which is an acronym for Content Management Solution. What that means is Parttrap out of the box includes the ability to build a very robust and compelling front-end website. However, if you already have a website that you've invested in, you're comfortable with, we're going to show you how you can attach our spare parts management, our dealer portal right to that, so you can reuse the investment that you've already made. So Parttrap has the integration, content management, and another acronym there is PIM, which stands for Product Information Management. Well, what is that? In essence, that is the central repository. Think of your data, think of it as your data warehouse where all of the images, product descriptions, technical documentation, customer reviews. Hey, you looked at this product, you might also be interested in that product for every channel that you sell. You may manufacture a product that's sold through a different marketplace, be it Amazon or some other industry marketplace. They may have specific requirements and for the kinds of images and information, et cetera. And that's all handled in the Parttrap PIM. And as previously mentioned, out of the box, B2B, B2C, and B2B 2X for your dealer portal, all in one. We already had our survey, so we're going to go through this. But we are going to focus our demo today on our spare parts management, our dealer channel, and the ability to enrich a product so that the products that you sell tell the best possible story. So if I'm a company that manufactures mountain climbing equipment, I want to start my story right here. And I'm going to continue with our story because the world has certainly changed. I think personally for us and doing business for us, many of you may be finally going back to the office or attending trade shows or dinner out with your family, okay? And that's how it's impacted us maybe personally. But COVID has also greatly impacted the B2B marketplace in that industry research tells us that it's probably accelerated by 5 years, the B2B e-commerce adoption, the ability for your customer to go to your website, find everything they need about the product to place an order, or get on the phone and call you if that's your business process. Product information has really become the digital front door of your business. The fact of the matter is, especially the younger generation, I'm a baby boomer and I do it myself, but so many of the younger generation now, they're starting research on products in the web and they don't care. They expect to see the same information, same amount of content, whether it's on their office computer, their laptop, their smartphone, their iPad, whatever it is they're using to gain information. They expect a quality customer experience. And we're all about helping turn your product digital information into revenue. So think of the 3D drawings. Maybe you have complex drawings, 3D, 2D drawings, whatever. We're going to help turn that into revenue. We'll make this slide deck available. I'm not going to read each and every one or so, but this customer, Halton's, they needed a solution to better manage their dealers. They were finding that when they went to their dealers' websites, there was incorrect or outdated content or outdated pricing or products that no longer were active still being listed on their website, which could lead to a real customer service issue. And Logis Next, they wanted, one of their business drivers was they wanted to increase the sales of their spare parts and replacement parts, because their experience has shown that they typically can command a higher profit margin than the initial truck sale. Because, you know, again, people are going to look at 2 or 3 or 4 different products before they settle on one. So price is very important. Once they purchase that machine, for example, the spare part, if it's broken or about needs to be replaced, price becomes less of an issue. So now I'm going to turn it over to our founder and CEO, Uwe Tenberg. Uwe has tremendous experience working with Epicor partners and has personally been involved in a number of these customers. So Uwe, I'll stop sharing and looking forward to hearing your presentation.
Yes, thank you. I'll share my desktop.
We see it.
Great. Thank you, Chris, and good afternoon, everyone. So thank you for inviting me to this event here. It's exciting. I want to talk a little bit about some customers, examples of customers. I'll show you some live examples from what other customers or companies are doing, companies like yourself running Epicor. So the list of companies you see here is just an extraction of our customer base, but they represent the typical target for us, so to speak. Most of them are Epicor users. They are based either in North America or in Europe. They are manufacturers or distributors. They sell through dealer network, like Chris talked about, or in some cases, they sell directly. And I'll give some more examples on that later on. I would say all of them sell or manufacture complex products, and that could be complex offerings. It could be configurable products. It could be products with accessories or spare parts. And many of these companies manufacture equipment that need replacement parts. So there's an aftermarket for many of them. And finding the correct spare part is not an easy job in all cases. So an efficient way of sort of guiding the dealer or the end user to the right part is essential actually for making any profit on this. Most of them sell on multiple markets, specifically the European companies. They sell throughout different markets in Europe. They sell in North America, and they need to support multiple languages, currencies, and also their own subsidiaries or sales companies, and also dealer networks globally. So I'm going to give you an example from one of these companies, Permobil, and they are a global manufacturer of what they call powered wheelchair, electrical wheelchairs. They are all over the place in about 20 markets today. They sell about 200,000 of these advanced powered wheelchairs per year, and they have a great aftermarket situation where they can support their dealer network and end users with accessories and spare parts 24/7. So they need to have the support for multiple markets, languages, and currencies, like I mentioned, but they also need to support multiple ERPs. And that's actually possible with the Parttrap platform, that we can connect not only Epicor companies, but also other ERP systems like Microsoft or other ERP systems actually in the same setup. So this is a great benefit when you're a global company working in many markets. You may acquire new companies and need to integrate them into your infrastructure. So you need to be able to add new ERP systems to the platform. I'm going to switch over to a demo where I'm going to show you how they sell spare parts to their customers. So they have set up a number of different sites. Some of them are market sites with corporate content. This specific site is primarily for sales of spare parts and accessories for certain markets. So when somebody logs in, could be a dealer, could be an end user, when they log in, they meet this dashboard where they can find the latest orders. They can, of course, search for all orders, and they can always reach all orders and invoices that exist in your Epicor system, not only the ones that have been placed through the portal. It's actually a window right into your Epicor system. They can also create their own shopping lists if they reorder the same type of products quite often. They can have favorite products where they set up individual products that they may need to access quickly. And they have what we call My Area, where they can get the customer service they need, for example, order tracking, things like that. But I'm going to focus on spare parts today. So they have a very easy access to the spare part search here. You can either search by finding your model and then your module and drill down to the smallest component, or you can search directly on a spare part by name or part number. It's also possible to use serial number if necessary. But let's search for example, an M3 2020. I know that my spare part I'm looking for is placed in the chassis, and it's in the swing arm front right. So this is a simple way to drill down to a certain small, tiny portion of the product. And the system will load an exploded view that represents this component. And they have thousands of exploded views. They have added hotspots on top of the exploded views. So instead of just a paper catalog, they actually have a live catalog which is updated constantly. And their customers can access this information anytime, 24/7. And the customers, they actually learn that they access exactly the same information as Permobil does themselves. So they stop calling the customer service. They understand that they can find the information much easier themselves using this interface. And they can actually print out, if they want to, a catalog page like this, and it's automatically created on the fly based on the latest information. So you have your image, you have your bill of material, and you have additional information down here. It could be in any language, could include price if you like. It's also possible, if you don't have the energy to add the hotspots, you can actually order directly from a list of components. So these are components relevant for this search I did. Or they can use the interactive exploded view by hovering over the hotspots. And you can see that even the bill of material will be linked to the individual components like this. And this can be achieved using a standard file type called SVG. And this is something you can get out of your CAD system automatically. So if you create these drawings in your CAD system, you can produce an SVG file with this interaction and with the hotspots automatically. And we can read that file and convert that into something you can use to order. So for example, if I want to order this item, I click on it, it goes directly into Epicor, it finds the product, it knows the next delivery date, it will tell you if it's available or not, and I'm now hiding the price because this is a public presentation, so to speak, but normally the price is here, and that of course is your net price calculated by Epicor logic. So you get your closest warehouse, the availability, you get your net price, and you can place the order immediately, clicking the button. So this way you have made sure that the user or end customer has actually identified the correct spare part. And that is a dramatic change compared to somebody discussing over phone with customer service, trying to explain what they're looking for. And in many cases, they get the wrong part. Here, they always get the right part. So this is an example of how you can use interactive exploded views. I will move one step further and show you how you can improve the interactivity much more and actually provide better usability. So Permobil has decided to use, again, the existing CAD files that they produce using SolidWorks or Autodesk or similar CAD systems. And of course, they use these CAD drawings for production and construction, but they can now also use them for sales. And this is something you should think about. If you are now producing a lot of CAD files for production, why not rethink and use them also for sales? Because you can do like this. You can add it to the site. You can let your customers zoom in. They can point at a module on the product, click here and drill down to the next level. And in this case, I'm actually looking for the battery inside here. And now you can seamlessly move between 3D and 2D. So again, the last step here is to find that exploded view that we have prepared, where you have your battery, you click on it, you read that it's available quite soon, and you can order it like that. So you don't need to do all at once. You don't need to create 3D for all your products. You can choose your newest release or the most frequent product to sell, do the 3D thing on that one, and then drill down to the more simple 2D drawings to provide this service to your customers. So this is an example of how you can use interaction to let the customer take responsibility for the identification of the spare part and order it directly. And of course, the customer is satisfied to know when it's arriving. They will know the price. They get the order number immediately on the screen when they place the order. So the checkout is, of course, very simple. They go to the cart. They check out like this. They decide if it's going to be an order, request for a quote, or something else, and use the normal checkout procedure. So that was spare parts. Now I'm going to go to the next step and talk about configurations. Because in many cases, manufactured parts can be quite complex. And in many cases, manufacturers claim that it's impossible to sell these products online because they're complex. They need a sales engineer to guide the user. But today, the technology has come so far, so you can actually run a 3D configurator in your mobile phone. I'm going to display this on the computer screen, but you can run this on your smartphone, of course. And again, you will use your existing CAD data if you have that. You don't need to take any product photos any longer. You can actually create photos or sort of visualizations based on the 3D drawings. And that has been done in this case that I'm going to display now. So I'm going to show you just a simple example of how you can customize or configure a snowplow. So I will now move into another site. This is just a demo site for Parttrap, and this site is set up as a demo for spare part sales. And as you see, we have examples of plain interaction with an image like the ones you normally have in your paper catalogs. Or you can extend the functionality and add SVG files, which gives you some animation with coloring and all that. Or you can go all the way and have 3D models representing the product, and you can rotate it and point at a certain product. Now I'm going to show you how you can use the same technology to configure something. So let's say that you're looking for a snowplow. It's almost season for that now, at least here in Sweden. And while you're configuring, you have a 3D representation of your product all the time. So if I attach something on the top, on the back here, it will actually hook on and you can see it. You can make some changes. Maybe you want to have tilted or straight cutting edge. You may want to have kickstands. And you may want to have a larger size. And maybe you want a yellow product. So this is the final product. You can check it out. You can take a snapshot of it and you can get that as an attachment to the order, so you know what you ordered. And the system will also calculate the price in this case, and you order the product by clicking the button. And the thing is now that the configurator will create a bill of material for you. So in the cart, you don't have one item, you have all the different components you need to build this, so you can actually assemble it yourself. And this is in many cases what you require if you're running Epicor and you would like to assemble this. So depending on how you set up your backend in Epicor, you may have a configurator in Epicor which we can feed with the product data, or you may want to end up with a sales order in Epicor and we can provide that sales order directly from the site. So in this case, I just check out and get the order confirmation. I know the price, I know the availability, when it's going to arrive to me, and I'm happy. So this is a good example of a very simple configuration. And I think the interesting thing here is that we can set up this either with very simple configurations, we call them guided selling or wizards, but it could also be more complex setups. And you can display the configuration in 2D or, like in this case, in 3D. 3D, of course, will require you to have that 3D model available. But you should know that we have the tools in the platform to convert that 3D file from your CAD system into something you can use like this. Okay, the third option or third feature I will demonstrate today is something we call the dealer portal, or B2B2X, as Chris said. And a dealer portal, of course, that could be a simple website where your dealer can log in, place the order, get their own agreed price. They will get the order delivered to the address they specify, and that's it. So that's a simple type of dealer portal. But what we're talking about here is a situation where you may be a manufacturer, you may have a dealer network, and those dealers have end customers that would like to place orders. And your dealer network may not be capable of providing good enough web solutions to sell efficiently. So as a manufacturer, you can assist your dealers to set up dealer sites, including all the products they need, including, for example, configurations that the dealer would never manage to do themselves. But as a manufacturer, you can do that for them. So if you look at the image on the right side here, you have your system and you may sort of brand the site to look like the dealer's site and present the products and make them available for purchase from the end customer. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in a few seconds here. The the important thing is that we have a solution that can support your collaboration as a manufacturer, your collaboration with your sales channels, and create a bond between you and your dealer network, because you can provide a lot of assistance to dealer network. This is one example, but we also have examples where we can provide quotation systems for the dealer network, so the dealer can create quotes to the end customer. And of course, that has a lot of benefits. One of the benefits is that you as a manufacturer will get more information from the market, because you can see exactly what's happening at the end user level, because all that will happen in your site suddenly. So if your dealer is creating a quotation, you as a manufacturer will be able to follow exactly what they're quoting. They will see the end user's activity on the site, and you can draw conclusions out of that. Maybe it's going to be more clear when I give you an example here. So in this case, I am actually logged in as a dealer. As a dealer, I have control over all the orders I've placed. I can search for quotes, I can search for invoices, I have my favorite products, my shopping lists. I have everything I need to be a good dealer, and I can place orders in this site, ordering, for example, snowplows. But I'm now going to act as the end customer. So I go in here and I log in as an end customer to the same site. So now suddenly I have, as an end customer, logged into exactly the same site, but it's branded like EstesGroup. So if EstesGroup was a dealer for these products, then this is what it would look like. I can still access exactly the same products, the same functionality, spare part management. I can access the configurator if I want to. So as you understand, the dealer doesn't have to maintain anything. They get everything for free, all the product data, everything exactly as they like it. And they get, of course, the assortment they have chosen to sell to their end customers. And one extra very important thing is that the prices shown in this site is not the dealer prices, it's actually the end customer prices. And the way to achieve that is to let the dealer upload the end customer prices to the portal. So now we can give the dealer a portal branded as their profile with their assortment they sell to their end customers, and also the end customer pricing. So let's say that I, as an end customer, would like to order something. For example, I would like to have a spare part, and I search for it somehow, and okay, here is the product I'm looking for. So here I see all the data that is managed and maintained by the manufacturer. So the dealer doesn't need to do anything about this. They have everything they need. They have downloadable documents, videos, manuals, whatever they need. They have a price, which is the end customer price, and they can easily add this to the cart. So now the question is, let's say the end customer places the order now. Does the dealer actually accept that? What happens if somebody logs in, places a crazy order, and that goes in? Because this is actually going to be treated as a dealer order to the manufacturer. So what we have done here is that we set up a limitation. So there is a limit. How much can the end customer purchase for before it has to be approved by the dealer? And the limit we have set here is $1,500. And this is now only 560. So if I go to the cart, and I can actually see the amount here, it's not visible for the end customer normally, but we have made it visible for the presentation. So if I go to the cart as an end user and I check out, I can create my address. Maybe this is the address in the US. I continue. Here is the order, and I confirm it. Now, this was a very small amount. So now the order confirmation is ready. I have an order number, I have delivery date, I'm happy as an end customer. And the amount was small enough to just pass without any approval from the dealer. But let's say now that I would like to place a larger order. So I go back here and I order the same product again, but I need to place 3 to exceed that limit. So if I go to the cart now, you can see that the price is $1,680. So this means that I've exceeded the approval amount that the dealer has set. And what happens when I check out? This is also just information for you. It does not display for the end customer. It's something that the system knows, and it tells you now during the demonstration. We continue to delivery. You can choose when to deliver it, go to payment, confirm the order. And it will actually tell us now that one or several criteria have triggered this order for approval. So what happens now? Well, the system will send an email to the dealer saying that your customer has now placed an order. It has exceeded your limit, so you need to go in and approve that. So let's say we log out now as the customer, and we log in as the dealer again. You have to tell me if it's difficult to follow. But now I have got an email saying that my end customer has placed an order. I need to go in and approve that. So I go into the site, I go to my area, and I look, waiting for approval. Here, all orders will appear that are waiting for my approval. So now I can see that Brad Feeks has placed an order today. And I can view it. I can choose to reject the order or approve it. I decide to approve it. So now the order goes into Epicore. It's now an order placed by the dealer into the manufacturer. And the dealer will charge the end customer based on information that we send from the portal. So now the dealer can see that, okay, these are the orders that we have approved. There's one rejected for some reason. Yeah, we don't trust this guy, it says. So it's rejected and nothing else is waiting. So now the whole procedure, the whole workflow is ready. So this was an example of how we can set up a dealer portal that is really a dealer portal, not just a portal where the dealer can place orders. It's actually a collaboration between manufacturer, dealer network, and the end customers, and everyone is happy. So I will switch back to you now, Chris.
Hey, Uwe, before you do, go back to the snowplow screen, the initial screen you went to.
This one?
Front end. Yes. So just as a refresher, again, out of the box, Parttrap includes the ability using our content management tools and something we call Parttrap Studio to build a very robust website. Now, if you pull that screen down a little bit, let's just look at all the components of it. Which includes search engine optimization tools. So if someone does a Google on snowplows and your company has paid the appropriate monies to Google so that you appear high up in the search, once they hit your website, they expect to see a lot of interesting and images, a lot of content and information. So pull that down a little bit further. And you'll have the ability, of course, all the information is there for you. So in our case here, we have the demo sites there in the bottom. It says snowplow, but also golf store. That's where maybe you want to offer B2C services too, like Volvo is one of our customers, trucks and hats and keychains and whatever it may be, shirts, sweatshirts, jackets, etc. That's all available on from a B2C side. So again, our CMS takes care of that. And bring that screen back up. The image you see of the snowplow or of the beautiful forest there, the mountains, whatever, those would be specific images that are stored, that you decide they're stored within the Parttrap PIM, as well as the 2D or 3D SVG drawings that we mentioned. And then using Studio, we can train you, the marketing team or the commerce team from each of your organizations, to do that, enrich it, or we can do it as a service. Parttrap does offer a consulting service to enrich your products. So all we would need to be added to the PIM would be from your engineering department, the 2D or 3D drawings, and then, of course, just the descriptions, technical documentation, images, whatever, PDFs, et cetera, that help enrich your product. So I hope that, taking that extra step. Now, Uwe, one more thing. In the survey, there was a lot of interest in warranty. So I sell a new snowplow and I want to upsell them with a warranty. Could you just talk briefly about the ability of Parttrap to help drive new revenue and manage warranties?
Yes, sure. So you can either, typically when you sell equipment, there is a warranty included in the sales. You may have different options. You may include 1 year warranty, but you can extend that immediately at the first stage to 2 or 3 years, or you may want to extend that warranty at a later stage. So we can create those warranty as contract lines on the sales order in Epicore. And then we can track that when it's time to extend the warranty. Then the customer can get a notification that it's now time to extend. They can go in with a link and they can add another year for a certain amount. And also, of course, if they use our claim and return module, when they claim something to be broken, for example, the system will check if the warranty is still valid and use that warranty. So there are a lot of functionality available on top of what you've seen right now. And some modules, like the claim module, will also give you the ability to communicate and interact with your customer online, and also handle the back end of warranty claims. So I think that is an example of how you can sell warranty online. We can make it happen in the back end of Epicore and use that for claim processes later.
And all of the appropriate dashboard reports that these other customers whose warranty is going to expire in December, and using our campaign module to push information out to them, whether it's an email or whatever it might be, to re-up their warranty so they stay in compliance. So what we saw here was in the dealer portal, Uwe took it a step further and provided some excellent examples of the flexibility and customization of Parttrap to meet the specific business rules and business model that our customers live by every single day. So we're not trying to force you into one box. You've built a very strong, successful business. We're here to help our products and services really expand your client base and revenue to continue to have long-term profitable customers. So a few best practices before we wrap up here for some questions. So in making a decision, there's a number of stakeholders that typically are involved, as well as specific building blocks to build a successful commerce portal like you just saw. And when we say, ladies and gentlemen, some of you may not sell product. You want to use Parttrap as more of a content and information website. Your model is not to sell. You're getting purchase orders or EDI orders. You don't take orders over the web today. That may change. We certainly can handle that requirement too. I don't want you to think that it's only for companies that would sell something and collect payment over the web. And speaking of payments, out of the box, if I ordered that spared, Brad ordered that spare part and he needed it rushed right away, we have the ability to integrate with multiple payment processing solutions like EBIS Charge, which is fully integrated right back into Epicore. So we've eliminated double entry of entering the quote or the order into Epicore. And also it's a seamless integration from the credit card payment right back to the accounts receivable for that order, that invoice right within Epicore. Okay, so there's various building blocks and then your choices of being a single or multiple vendor. So next slide, please, Uwe. Typical stakeholders are going to be, your customer itself, finding out from your customer what would make it easier to do business with you. It's got to be simple, and people expect the simplicity like an Amazon gives you today. Your sales staff, think of using Parttrap also as a sales tool for your sales staff or customer service rep. We don't charge by the number of users. We don't try and penalize you for using our product. Whether you have 1 or 500, they all can use Parttrap, no difference in the cost. Marketing, we're here to help your marketing team get the latest product information out to, so make sure marketing is involved in the decision, as well as customer service, we mentioned them. And for your IT, it's got to be simple. As I mentioned earlier, it's be hosted on Azure, hosted on your own on-prem cloud or some private cloud. Next slide, please. All those stakeholders are involved. These are the building blocks to have a successful solution, something that a tool that has a lot of content. I can't underestimate the real-time integration with Epicore, eliminating double entry, eliminating mistakes, and improving customer service. And you need the ability to enrich your products, so it should have a PIM. Many other companies' products out there require you to have a separate PIM or a very limited PIM. And again, the B2B or B2C or dealer e-commerce. Next slide. So your choice is really multiple vendors, which adds the complexity and cost and upgrades and eventually finger pointing, or go to a single stack solution that's partnered with EstesGroup and Epicor. And we believe the bottom line will be a much faster ROI and a more successful implementation. And next slide. Just as a reminder, out of the box, Parttrap includes all of those. Next slide. And let's go right to our offer, and then we can come back into Q&A. So as a follow-up, what we will offer is a no-cost review. A no-cost review of your current situation, challenges, needs. It needn't take a whole lot of time. But we'll come back with some suggested possible ways forward, and you would coordinate that through Brad and the Rob and the outstanding professionals with EstesGroup. So having said that, I think we're right on time. We're about 10 minutes of, maybe a little earlier. We'd like to open up for any not only questions. I really would value some feedback from the folks that are out there, our audience today, on what you saw, and if you see that relevant for the way you would present your products to your customers. So if we could open up the
absolutely. And we did, while I'm pulling my screen up, I'll just go ahead in the sake of time. We had a question. Uwe mentioned that the configuration released an order which compromised of individual parts in the configurated BOM? Can it drive the release of a single part which corresponds to the configuration instead?
Yes, we could convert that into a configurable part that is understood in Epicore as a configurable part, and then deliver potentially in UD fields all the details, all the selections made in the configuration on the web. So we load the configured item as a single item, single order line. It will be handled by the Epicor configurator using the attached UD field content.
We had a second question from Robert. What is the licensing model for the Parttrap product?
It's one single license, server-based license. You can have as many users as you like, both internal and external users. So we charge for the first company, and then we charge for additional Epicor companies, like 25% additional license cost per extra company. So if you're one single company, then it's one license. If you have two additional companies, for example, Canada and Mexico, it's another 50% on top of that. So that's the model. We are. It's important for us that we don't limit the number of users. It doesn't have to be named users; could be any type of users, and you can also divide your users into different categories or personas. And like we showed with the branding of the site, you can actually do that based on logged in personas as well. So you can group your customers or users, you can give them different interaction, different menu structure, different product assortment, different everything basically within that sort of license.
Thank you, Uwe. We have another question. How is this different from the Epicor E-Commerce Module? What effect does this have on Epicor Performance, excuse me, and did you provide assistance on building configurators? So 3 for 1.
Yeah, the performance. We have a model where we actually read raw data from Epicor, and it's a synchronization, or sorry, it's a replication of Epicor data, which is on what we call transactional level, which means that only data that changes in Epicor will actually be transferred over to the web. So it doesn't put any load on your production server. And the good thing with reading raw data is that if, like Chris said earlier, if you take your Epicor system down for some reason, or the application server, then we don't need that application server because we have all the raw data we need. We have all the logic we need, the Epicor logic in our web platform. So we can still continue to sell online while Epicor is down. When Epicor is up and running again, we take all those queued orders and push them into Epicor. So that gives you the best of two worlds, very good performance because we have cached the data outside of Epicor. It doesn't read a massive amount of data. It reads only what has been changed in Epicor.
How does this differ from the Epicor E-Commerce Module or that is offered?
Well, the Epicor ECC is more or less a connection between Epicor and Magento, which is a large e-commerce platform. So ECC is Magento with a connection to Epicor, basically. Mm. So, of course, Magento is a capable, good e-commerce platform. It may not be so B2B centric as our platform, and it doesn't have natively the features that we've shown today. These are all native functionality made specifically for Epicor users running a B2B model. So I think both systems are great. I'm very satisfied with how we can handle the load on Epicor. It doesn't put any load on your production server, as I said. We have the ability to run it even if Epicor is down, which is quite unusual. And we have a very attractive license model if you are using if you want to allow multiple dealers and customers to access the site.
Do you provide this is another question, do you provide a software as a service solution for those who don't want to host this product?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We actually, I would say 80% of new customers, they choose to go the SaaS path. So we offer Azure hosting of the platform, but you can have your Epicor system either on-prem or in the cloud. It doesn't really matter. So we have what you call a hybrid solution where we are flexible enough to cover for any setup you like. So it could be in Azure, it could be hosted by EstesGroup, of course, or it could be on-prem if you prefer that.
Okay, good information. Last question is, say a customer has an environment where they have a combination of point of sale and e-commerce and accept credit cards for both of them. How do you have the capability to handle that sort of scenario?
Yes, absolutely. We have a built-in point of sale solution, also web-based. So you can charge over the counter using credit card or gift cards or checks or whatever, cash. And we handle that with all the processes in the back end of Epicor. And it's actually exactly the same platform as we use for the online sales on the web.
Uwe, Chris, you guys have done an amazing job of explaining a pretty capable product here, and we do appreciate your contribution this afternoon. I think at this point, we're going to wrap that up. Thank you again. And very impressive product. We're going to take a quick break. And while we're doing that, Cindy's going to put a poll up asking about that will be applicable to our next session. So Cindy, do you have that?
I got it. It's out there.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Uwe and Chris. That was wonderful. And any questions, just as a reminder, this is recorded. And you guys are welcome to break, but while we're breaking, this is recorded. And if you are on our mailer, you should be getting an email with a link to the recording. You're welcome to share that with anyone else on your team. And then if you don't, I know that some of you I speak with off and on. I'll make sure that I reach out as soon as that's available if the mailer hasn't gone out. I know some of you guys are eager to share this with your team. So with that, enjoy your break.
All right, and we'll be back at, I guess, about 4 minutes.
right, I am going to go ahead and go over these results and in the poll. And then after I share these results, Rob will be introducing our next presenter. Okay, so what reporting tools, platforms are you currently using? 97% of you said BAQs and dashboards. Great. Updatable dashboards, 67%. SSRS reports, about 78%. Crystal reports, 25%. Active homepage, Epicor data discovery, 6%. EDA, 8%. That's Epicor data analytics. Third-party business intelligence, BI, Tableau, probably butchered that, Power BI, etc. That's 61%. So with that, Rob, would you like to introduce Joe?
Sure, I'd like to do that. And just a quick note, giraffes, fascinating trivia, only sleep about 30 minutes a day. So put that under your hat. Think about that. Their secret is they take lots of 1-minute naps during the day. And I'm promising you, this is true. Joe Trent, however, does not take 1-minute naps, and he is our next speaker. So Joe will be talking about business activity queries. A little bit about Joe. He's a senior consultant with the Estes Group. He's been with us since 2016. And he's worked in the areas of custom solutions, product configuration, data conversions, helping a lot of our Epicor customers overcome technical challenges. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our in-house expert on BAQs, Joe Trent. Take it away, Joe.
Hey, folks. I'm Joe Trent. I've been with Estes here about 5.5 years. Obviously, I've got a number of years at some other places and on some other products. But one of the cool things about Epicor is the ease of use of the query system. And we want to look at a couple of things here. And we'll get this guy off the screen and then share this, and we'll just jump right into it. One of the things, if you used the BAQs on E9, one of the shortcomings was the lack of subqueries, and with E10, those were added in, and they make life a lot easier in doing a number of things. So a query can consist of a combination of several types of subqueries. So quickly, your top level query is the main query. That's what drives everything else. It's what displays the data, all that kind of thing. But there are some other subqueries or subcomponents of the query that you can divide some of the work out and put it into. And here are some types. The top level query, that's your main query. Union queries, we may look at some of these depending on time, but if you've got data from different sources that you want to splice together with another source, well, we'll look at some of those, but unions, intersect, accept, all of those, you can take data from different sources and patch it together with the main query and put those different source datas together. The common table expression, something I don't use a whole lot of, but it's good for hierarchical data, recursive data, like maybe a recursive bill of material query, that kind of thing. The inner subquery is basically the same as the top level, but it's the lower level version of it, and you can kind of call it to get some information out of. And we'll look at that's what we're going to look at today primarily. So one of the things I see on a lot on the Epicor help boards is, how do I do subtotals? You know, for example, I might want to have a query that lists customers and the open balances of all of the open orders. So subqueries are good for doing that kind of thing. Today, I'm going to give you a quick run through of a couple of different subqueries and of how you could use those in your BAQs and dashboards. So let's just jump right over into one and we'll start off. In this first one, we'll look at how to count things or total things from multi-line or multi-row data into one data row from your top level, your query. And in this case, we're going to look at how to get a list of part revisions where we have multiple approved revisions. And sometimes your engineering department will need something like that. So we're going to give it a name. Let's give it something like that. And we want to share it so everybody will be able to see it and we'll be able to find it in the future. We're going to drag in, going to the phrase build, we're going to drag in the part table. And the part revision table. And you'll see that has auto-magically connected the tables together. Sometimes you get that and sometimes you won't, depending on the relationship of the tables you bring in. We'll go display some fields. Let's get the part number, part description, the revision and description and approved status. Things like that. And we can go see that. There's our part revisions and their parts. But we in this case, we're going to count the number of approved revisions. And we're going to do that by adding a subquery. And so subquery 2, if we'll notice in subquery options, it's defaulted to an inner subquery, and that's good because that's what we want. In this subquery, we're going to go back to our phrase build list, and we're going to bring in part rev again, because we're going to use this to do some counting. Let's go ahead and make that big. All right. So the first thing we want to look at is we're going to count only the approved revisions. So we'll add a criteria to the list that says approved equal true, or you could use 1 here, true, false, 1, 0. I like that way better. And add a couple of fields. Notice I always add the company field in here just for clarity and for speed too, because you don't have to put the company in there. But there are some good reasons too, including speed and clarity there. Now, in this one, you know, the part revision table can contain multiple records, but to our query, we want to return only a single record per part. So we're going to click the group by fields. And then when you select group by fields, then the SQL is going to want you to use an aggregate function, which is just ducky because that's what we want to do here. So aggregate functions are things like sum and average and min and max, that kind of thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to count the number of revisions, assign that a type of integer because we're just counting whole numbers. And then for each revision record, we're going to count some one. So if we wind up, if this part has 10 revisions, we'll come up with 10 right there. Okay. All right. So now we have, notice we've got this one aggregate and we've got the group by, so we're all good on that count. But we haven't linked it to our main query yet. So we'll need to go back to the main query, back to the phrase build, and then we'll click on this subqueries icon there to display the subqueries, and we'll just bring that in right there. All right, and we want to link the subquery to the part table. And notice on here, we don't have the automatic table relations, so we'll have to create some. So we'll say we want the company to equal the company and the part num to the part num. And notice this is just like connecting up a table. In fact, if you'll see this table here is really a little query. This is a little query, and we're just connecting all of these things. All right. And notice when we clicked on this one, the fields that we defined in our subquery come up in this list so that we can access those. All right, now if we look here and we want to display that field, and I could just put this part number in here and it would display just fine. One of the things I found out using subqueries is that if I do this and then I go back and make some kind of major changes to the subquery over here, and I add something or to delete something, I can come back over here and this thing has disappeared. So what I like to always do, just out of habit, is to create a new calculated field. You notice I have to name this something different than my other one I've just created in the subquery, and make it the same data type. And then I'm going to say something like this. This is shorthand for a longer case statement. It says, if this field is null, then substitute 0. Otherwise, use this field. So in case it's null, I don't have to worry about matching the null or anything like that. That'll just, if it's null, it'll return 0, and we're all good. So there we got all our information. And we can go to analyze and test, see what that looks like. All right, so there's our revisions or parts, and you can see we've got some there that have multiple approved revisions. All right, but wait, our engineering people say we've got thousands of revisions. We only care about the ones that have multiple approved revisions. So we can go back over to this phrase build and put a little table criteria there that says the calculated number of revisions is greater than 1. And we run the test again. And there we go. Those are all the parts with multiple approved revisions and which ones those are. How easy is that? All right, we'll just save that one. Okay. So coming up next, we've got kind of a little variation on this. Again, we're going to use an inner subquery, and we're going to use an aggregate function, but with a couple of different purposes. So let's just clear all of this out. We're going to be using the Parttrap table in this, so I'm just going to name it that. And share that, save it. In this query, we're going to again, we're going to run a list of parts, but we're going to say, okay, for a particular part number, what is the last time we shipped one of those from stock to a customer? So we're going to use the Parttrap table to look at that. First, we're going to bring in the part table. And we're going to display the part number and the description. And let's add a few things to that. All right. And we said we were going to connect this part table to the part transaction table, but we don't want to put, in this case, we don't want to put the Parttrap table directly in here for a couple of reasons. And one of them is speed. There are a couple of tables in Epicore that just wind up with a huge number of records. Parttrap is one, TransGLC is another one. And if I were to put Parttrap here like this and connect it up, this Parttrap, this little query here for Parttrap has to run a bunch of times to match this. And then it's got to make a bunch of decisions on this. And what happens a lot of times is when you've just installed Epicor and you go in and you say, I need this BAQ, and you go and do that, and you connect it up here and it runs great. And then in 2 or 3 years, it's not running as fast anymore. In 4 or 5 years, it just dies completely. What's happening is this Parttrap table is getting full. And the keys to this Parttrap table are not, the key fields are not the fields you'll be connecting with. So it's inefficient because it's got to really run the whole query even to filter out the things you're looking for. So we're going to delete that out of there. And we're going to bring it over here into the subquery. Now, when we do this, we only have, when it exists in this subquery, the query for this little table here is only going to have to run once. It runs once and builds this list of data. And then when we go back to the main query, it's going to just draw from this list that we built. So this one only has to run one time, and it's a tremendous increase in speed. Okay, and then while we're at it, we want to build a little speed in here. So we want to filter out anything that we're not going to use. If, for example, we don't care about anything that's done more than a year ago, we can filter out all the dates, the transaction dates that are older than a year. So you don't even have to go through those, whatever it is. But you can make a decision on what you need and what you don't. In this case, we're going to set a filter because we defined this query as we wanted to display the last transaction date for shipments from stock to a customer. So I'm going down here into the table criteria, and we're going to say the transaction type equals stock to customer. Okay, so we're going to filter out everything but that, because that's all we care about in this. If you wanted shipments from jobs, you would add a stock manufacturing to customer, you know, whatever you like to see there. You can find a list of these transaction types in the Epicor help, so you can go through and look at that. Okay, so now we're going to do good stuff. We're going to set up some display fields. And if you remember from last time, we wanted one record per part. So we're going to summarize everything for this part number into one part to return to the main query. Remember last time we used the aggregate function sum. And in this one, we're going to have several things in play here. We're going to set up a calculated field that's going to contain several pieces of information. And since we wanted the data on the last time we did this, we're going to say on the last date that we sold one of these things, what's the order number, that kind of thing. So we've got to call this something. So we say max tran, because we're going to use a max function. And this is a string in varchar. And we want to set it up with plenty of room to put that output. All right, I've got a formula here I'm going to paste in because it'll take a while to key it, but we'll go over what this does. We're using a max function here. And what we are doing with this field here is we're concatenating the date, the transaction quantity, the order number, and the customer number for the last date we ship this from stock. So if we use the max, if we format the date to year, month, and day, then the max of this is going to be the last shipment date. And then we could use some max and min functions on some of these other things, but they wouldn't be guaranteed to be the transaction that occurred on this date. So we're going to tie all these together and do the max on them. And you notice this is all converting into a string. So we format the transaction date to a string, and we concatenate it with a tilde because we're going to use that to split it back apart later. We convert the transaction quantity to a string, the order number to a string, and the customer number to a string. And we're going to use that customer number for another purpose. All right. And let's see, while we're here, let's just look at another function. Let's say we wanted, when this happens, oh, by the way, what's the trailing 12 months history of that part that we shipped on that date? So let's call that TTM for trailing 12 months. And we'll make this one a decimal. And again, I'm going to paste this in here in the interest of time. In this one, we've got a case function here that says when when the transaction date is within the last year. It's greater than a year ago and less than today, or less than and equal today. Sometimes I've seen accidental postings in the future, so that kind of rules that out. Then when we get that transaction quantity, then we're going to sum those up for all the parts that we're looking at. For each part, we're going to sum all the transactions up for the last 12 months. All right. All right. And again, if we've used aggregate functions, then we have to use the group by. If we use the group by, then we have to use aggregate functions on anything that's doesn't have a group by. Okay. All right, let's go back over to the main query, and we're going to add these fields in here. If you recall, we put all of that transaction date and the data that goes with it into one string. So we don't want to just display that string. It wouldn't be very useful. So we're going to break them back out over here. So let's just go down the list. Transaction date. And call that a date. Paste this in and show you what we're doing. All right, bunch of stuff going on here. One is, remember we had the string that was tilde separated. So in the BAQ, we have this handy function, the ICE function, that will split that tilde delimited string, or whatever delimiter you want to use, comma, or whatever. Tilde is pretty handy. We're going to split that out, and we're going to get the first field if there's anything in there. And you notice I went ahead and said, if it's null for some reason, we want to use an empty string. So if that is not an empty string, then we convert it to a date and return that. Otherwise, it's just null. Okay. Then we want to do the same thing. We want to get the transaction quantity. And we did that a decimal, so we want to match it. And paste that in. And we're starting with the string. We're breaking out the second field. And if there's anything there, we're going to convert that into a decimal. That'll get our transaction quantity. We want order num, which is an integer. Paste that one in. Again, we're going to convert that to an integer, the third field of the tilde delimited field string. Then we're going to get num. That's an integer. I don't know how you folks are standing the excitement here. See if it's going to work. And TTM quantity, which we've said is an integer. And we're just going to make sure that's not a null, and bring in whatever is in that TTM from the subquery. Okay, that's all the calculated fields. But if you'll recall, we brought in this customer number. So let's do something with that. All right, so first we'll connect the we probably ought to connect the subquery. And let's say company equals company. Partnum equals partnum. And then we're going to go back and bring in the customer file. And we'll link that one up. Company equal company. And this is a good use for always adding a company, because I have to connect this with at least one field, and I don't have a customer number here. In part, remember we set the customer number over in the subquery. So I connect on company, and to filter out on customer number, I'm going to do a table criteria. And I'm going to say custom equal, and then an expression, I'm going to say, and here, this custom is the calculated field that we brought back from subquery 2. So this is how we're going to tell what that customer was on that last shipment. You'll notice these parentheses here. And I read somewhere long ago that if you put these parentheses around a calculated field, it forces that calculation to be run first. I don't know if that's true, but I always add that and it never blows up. So good luck thing. All right. So we'll look over on the, here we have added the customer. So let's display the customer ID and customer number. And then maybe we'll move those up here somewhere like that. Let's give that a save. Save early, save often. We'll just give it a test. Boy, this didn't happen in the preparation. What did I do? Sometimes it doesn't give you a good clue. Start the customer. What the heck? Well, rather than do all of that, we're just going to save that. And then we're going to go to one that I have prepared already and show you what that output is. So there's the output. We've got the customer name, trailing 12 months. We've got the order number, transaction quantity, and the last date. So there's that. Just like magic. Okay, looks like we've got a few minutes left here, so I think we'll look at a union query, and we'll have a little question and answer time after this. So keep those questions handy. All right, we won't actually build one, but I have this prepared ahead of time. There's a couple of things we'll look at here, and one is you've got some tables have multiple things in a row that you might want to break out. And for example, the order header table has got an infamous field in it that combines up to 5 sales reps in one tilde separated field. And the first time I saw that, I had a hard time wrapping my head around it. But I'll show you how we break those out. And when we break them out, we can put them on their own row. Instead of having one row that says sales rep 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we could have a single row for each sales rep. And we could do all of the associated fields like, the split and the percentage rate and that kind of thing. But here, I've got the order head table in here. And for demo purposes, I've said, I don't care about the items that only have one sales rep. So I have filtered this out to where the sales rep list is like, and then I put these wildcards in here. So if it has a tilde in there, which means it has more than one sales rep, I want to see that record. And I've got a calculated field, no group bound here because I'm not using an aggregate function. But I've got a calculated field here for sales rep. And you'll see with our handy dandy little ask function that I'm getting the first sales rep code in that list. And you say, well, that's all good. But what about the other two? Well, I'm glad you asked that. So now I've got a subquery here. And if we go to the subquery options, you'll see that this is a union subquery. And when we build a union subquery, we're saying that this subquery is going to output data in the same format as the main query. And so that's going to have the same number of columns, and each column is going to be of the same data type for each column, whether that's integer, string, decimal, whatever. The column headers don't matter because it only shows the column headers from the main subquery, but they all have to be the same type and the same number of rows, or you won't even be able to save it. So you'll see that in subquery 2, it just looks a lot like the first one. The sales rep list, I want to look at the only records that have a tilde in there, which means, of course, that I've got more than one sales rep. And then when I go to the display fields here, we'll see that sales rep 2 is the second in this sales rep list field. And I can just continue down the list. I've got sales. Everything here is the same, except I'm looking for the third record. So if we go back here, and we'll just run it. Okay, so we see we've got one order. In an order head, there's only one record per order number, but now we've got 3 rows here because we're actually running 3 queries and mashing them together. So we're getting one query with sales rep 1, one query with sales rep 2, one query with sales rep 3. The interesting thing is, a lot of interesting things, I guess. This union query will give you a distinct return in that if one of the subqueries gives you the same data back as the next subquery, it filters that out and only gives you one occurrence of it. There's another query type called union all that, if you had Brian in this sales order 3 times, this one would only give you 1 record. But if you use the union all, then you get Brian. So that's the difference there. And again, all of these subqueries have to return the same type of data and the same number of columns. If it's the same type and the same number, it doesn't care what you put in there. You can stuff all kinds of different data, but it has to be the same type and number of columns. And yeah, so okay, so that's a union query. And I think that's all I've got. So we've got a little extra question and answer time if we want to turn this back to the studio and read our answers or questions.
Definitely. Let me, okay, we had one come in. Oh, nope. Sorry. Let's see. Any questions? And thank you for attending.
So
Whoever had to.
I have a question here that has come up. It says, what would Joe do if he had a query that's running really slow? What would be a quick process or maybe an overview of the process to troubleshoot it?
Okay, see that quite a bit. We talked again on our, let's just look back at this last. Again, one of the reason we put the transaction into the second query is because of speed. And so you can do that in all kinds of places. Another issue we'll have a lot is just the construction of the query can be optimized. So let's just clear this out. Let's say, let's look at job header. Job material. Job hopper. There's let's just say, okay, we want to show only the jobs that are not complete. Okay, so we might go down here and put a table criteria, job complete equal false. Okay, and that'll work just fine because we've got these inner joins here that if it's not complete, it won't show any of these material or the job operation detail records that are associated with that job head. But it's still, this little query that's associated with this table has still got to run. And this, after years and years, this can get pretty big also. So if we'll notice out here in job material, it has its own job complete flag that we can go ahead and we can filter that one too. So we can say job complete equal false. And the same thing with job hopper. as job complete and operation complete. So we can do that as well. So what we have now is, this has got a smaller data set to pull from. This has got a smaller data set to pull from, the same thing there. So lots of different places you can look and see what can I filter out of that thing that's not going to affect the data that's coming back to me, but will reduce the load of the query on the system. So if we can get this down from 100,000 rows, it's got to look at to 5 or 10,000 rows or 100 rows, then it's going to run a lot faster, and it'll give you the same thing back. Of course, you don't want to filter out anything you need, but all through the when I see performance issues, it's usually something like this, or maybe a join that's not right, or something like that.
So it sounds like if I get stuck with one of these slow queries, I should place a call and get you on the phone.
Okay, there you go. There's another thing here. You see the subquery criteria. I can put something like out there too. The table is job, let's say the job head, and the field is job complete. And I could do the same thing out there that's functionally equivalent to putting the criteria right on the table. But remember, the subquery criteria runs after all of this stuff is done. So it's got to do all of this stuff and then filter the stuff out. So if you got a query in there that's filtering based on the subquery criteria, just remember that this happens last. And so if we didn't have all of these here, the criteria there, and we put the filtering at the subquery criteria, can't talk, then it's got to do all this stuff first and then do the filter. So sometimes that's the only way to do it, but just recall that's a slower way to go about it.
Well, Joe, thank you very much for sharing that. Cindy, we're going to take a break here in a minute, and I think you have another poll. Is that correct?
I do. Let me make sure. Were any questions, I believe, did you, Rob, excuse me, Joe, did you already answer if you could link a union query with another top level query?
No, I didn't. Unions are kind of fun. What I've done is I've linked unions with their own subqueries. And the thing there is that's getting, it's not something we're going to answer in a couple of minutes, but you can, out here in the subquery list, you'll see a list of all the queries, and you can, if you have a union query and a sub-level query, and then another union query, another sub-level query, you can put those in parentheses and tell the BAQ which ones go together. So if you got a union query that needs to go, you got a union query that does one of the subtotal, the aggregate functions we did today, you can have another subquery that union query references, and then it brings that back, and then it provides it to the upper level. But you'll want to segregate those unions and inner subqueries together, so that the BAQ knows which order to do all those things.
Wonderful. And can you call a query from a BPM?
Yes. Well, BPMs, you can build your own kind of simple queries there, and in BPM in code, you can call a regular one of these queries we've done here today. We could call that in a BPM.
So we had a comment from Brent, which I thought was applicable. And one of the other things that can really slow down query performance is when we use wildcards in the filter criteria, not realizing the impact that could have. So be careful of that too. Thanks for that comment from Brent.
And we have another question. Can CTE queries include more than one table? I've only ever seen examples using one table only.
I am not a CTE expert. I've used a couple of them, but frankly, I've grabbed a couple of samples and modified those. So I just haven't seen many of those work. I haven't had a call to do many of those. I think the only thing I've done is a recursive call on a bill of material where you'll have a manufactured part and break that down, and that's on down the line, an indented bill of material.
All right, and Rob, do you have any? Oh, sorry, Rob, did you have anything to add to that quickly?
No, not at all. That was.
Oh, all right. Sorry. I thought I heard you peep a little bit. Okay. Any other questions? We've got a couple more minutes. I know that something came in. I don't want to discard it because hello, David. I thought you went by David, but it's Robert today. Not so much a question, more lacking from Epicor. When adding fields into the final cursor, automatic field names are generated, but unfortunately, if the same field is present in more than one table, then the field name doesn't reflect the table. I've put an amendment request into Epicor for developers to always include the table and associator in front of the actual field name. For example, the part number field would generate a label part num and not simply part num, unless of course you have any easy method of forcing the table name into the generated field label. You can tell a not technical person read that, right? All right. Thank you for sharing that today.
And
nice to have you here again.
All righty. Hey, if you want copies of these queries, just send me a note at this email address, and I will send you the copies, and I'll be happy to share those.
Thank you, Joe. Very informative. So back to our next poll and break. So we're going to take a quick 5-minute break here. And Cindy, you've got a poll that you want to put up?
I believe, unfortunately, did not, another incident. My laptop died because it wasn't plugged into the wall that I didn't check. So I don't think I am the person that can put that up yet.
Okay, so I just launched it. I don't know if everybody can see it or not.
Yep.
All right, teamwork. By the way, interestingly enough, I had 3 power outages in the last 5 minutes here in my area. Luckily, my UPS was working correctly. Daryl can appreciate that, being on his side. So just a little plug there for everyone to use to protect themselves with UPS systems. If you want to be doing something like this where interacting with others is crucial. So we're getting quite a number of responses already. We're up to about 20 responses. Next session will be our last one, and we'll jump into that at top of the hour. And Cindy, you can get your laptop up and running, and we'll talk a little bit about the poll after that.
Wonderful. All right. Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Thanks. We'll be kicking off our last session here in about 60 seconds, so stay tuned.
And Rob, if you would like to share those results, I will read them to everyone before we go into our next session. All right, what are the common uses of DMT in your organization? Updating setup and master file data, 61%. Providing mass engineering updates, 13%. Updating transactional files, orders, jobs, and inventory at 23%. And no current use of DMT at 3%. All right, and I know that we had someone send in a quick comment about DMT, but I will mention that at the end. Looks like we're pressed for a little bit of time. Let's see. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, so for our next presenter, we have, if I'm not mistaken, Brad Feeks, who will be delivering a session on Epicore's data management tool. Brad joined the Estes Group in 2014. Brad has been an Epicor user and consultant since 2008 and has worked with companies large and small to implement and optimize their Epicor applications. And with that, let me turn it over to Brad.
Okay, excellent. Thank you, Cindy. And I will do a quick check here to make sure that you guys can hear my smooth and sultry voice. If you can't, please make a note in the chat that you can't hear me. And if you want me to shut up, I can do that as well. We'll just shorten this session. I can go either way. So want to talk to you guys today about DMT. I've been doing a fair bit of data conversion lately with some of my projects and thought, there's a lot of little tricks you pick up over the years that might be useful. Now, we're dealing with a pretty technical audience here, so I would say that this might be old hat for some of you. I'm hoping that you could at least leave with a nugget or two. Let me start sharing my screen here, and we will talk through some of the exciting opportunities that DMT has to offer. All right. So let's talk first about DMT itself and kind of come up with a base understanding here for the person new to DMT. So DMT at the core is using a set of methods that Epicor has that are called their update ext methods. I remember back in 905 when they first came out with update ext, and this was when service-oriented architecture was still a big fancy buzzword in the world, shortly after Six Sigma kind of tanked. But so these methods have to do with the mass updating of data in a manner that is more table-based and table set-based than it is based on a single method or a single set of methods that are strung together. You'll note that these are the same methods that Epicore's REST APIs use, and their updatable dashboards as well. So that was kind of some forward thinking on their part to put together these large methods to support large scale data updates, kind of build that into their architecture. So some things that are kind of important to understand about update ext, and this is going to relate then to the work you're doing in DMT, so that they don't map one-to-one with like the client's user experience. So a client might be working in Epicor and go through a bunch of steps, and the actual logic is happening in a bunch of chunks, right? Epicor has a bunch of methods that are fired off on data change events or various activities before you actually get to the part of updating a record and committing it to the database. So you have these different layers. Sometimes the UI is committing business logic activities that aren't on the server side. And so people kind of get used to having those there. So when they switch to DMT, those problems come up. I remember I was working with a consultant once, and she was just completely flummoxed that she couldn't get a part load to commit And we looked at it. It turns out she was putting in the descriptions of the part classes. So the part class description is understandably what you're picking when you're in the user interface, but at the data level, they want the actual methods. So those layers are there, aren't there to help you. So if you're creating that UI might relate to multiple method calls to get that data all perfectly set up. Those method calls, they set values, they allow certain values, they allow you to pick one value and have it relate to another. They perform some validation before you actually commit the record. Update ext it's more of a data centric. It's more like it's expecting that you know what those values are, you know what the minimum amount are. We'll talk a lot about minimum amount with some of these updates that we go through today in the demos. So to be able to make a record and commit it to the database, you need to have a good understanding of that data and the correct values to be used, because it's much more data centric than it is, I'd say, logically centric. All right, so why use DMT? Now, when I see customers using DMT, I see them using it in a lot of ways. Some of them recommended, some not as much, but it's used for a lot of people. And again, as we saw in the poll, you can see that folks are using it for a number of different reasons. So one obvious is data conversion, right? When we go live, we want to load all this data from an old system, and we do go through all that extraction from the old system. We transform it and convert it and make it all Epicor friendly, and then we want to load that back in. And that normally has to do with two base sets of files, as you have your setup and your master files, so your parts, your moms, your suppliers, customers, those kind of core building blocks. And then you have open loads of transactional files. So when I talk transactional file, I'm speaking to an open sales order, a PO job, or even inventory load. I kind of take in my mind, the parts are our master file. Their inventory is a transactional file, anything that's hitting the part tran table. I curse that table in my sleep. Ongoing management, of course, is a great area where DMT can be valuable. Now, again, it can also be misused to cover up for bad processes. And I'm not a recommender of that, but I've seen people do that. And I guess that's the lesser of two evils, perhaps. So master file updates, I see this a lot. And this makes a lot of sense in my mind, is you have a supplier commits a new price list and sends it to you, and you need to update all your values and your different pricing tiers and such. You want to get in there and do that. DMT is a nice way to make that update happen. Simple with, say, parts. You will decide that you're going to outsource a whole suite of your products. You need to turn those from manufacturer to purchasing and add other setup and perhaps change inventory levels. DMT is a nice way to make those kind of mass changes. I see engineering folks always using DMT extensively, especially if you're in a place where they're generating a lot of new product. Both in entry and maintenance. And we're going to go through a scenario today that has some maintenance, engineering maintenance flavors to it. And then transactional systems, right? You get certain areas, I see certain customers use DMT where they don't have physical staff to do things. Also see it where, and this again, it's not necessarily something I recommend, but in environments that are still very paper-based, where folks write down their timesheets and then someone else has to key those in. Well, I've seen folks use DMT as a means of getting those labor entry records in quickly. Again, I tend to push data entry at the point of use, but such as it is, it's sometimes it's not a hill you can die on. But also I've seen folks use that with PowerShell scripts to automate the loading of records. So using DMT with some PowerShell scripts and some watcher programs to look for incoming files from a vendor can provide some integration level work to grab that file, load it in, get from point A to point B. And that can be very helpful in situations where other people would have to be keying that in manually. And the record count, the transaction count is high. Most unfortunately, I often see it used in the correction of data mishaps. So sometimes you see my clip art there, the database is kind of off base. You might even say it's been debased. And I sometimes call this the sheep out of the barn phenomenon. You ever heard the saying, when it comes to breakfast, the chicken is involved, but the pig is committed. I remember hearing that for the first time, and it was an interesting farmyard metaphor that it took me a while to come up with. But in the idea of data management, we need more pigs. we need more company-wide commitment to data management. When that's absent, when you go live and you're not quite ready to handle the transactional load, both at a master file or transactional file level, the data can get dirty in a hurry. DMT is one way of kind of reining that in and getting yourself back to a level point. And hopefully that kind of takes your organization kind of ready to do things better starting now. So you have lots of those starting now moments. And I've seen this, for part management, if your engineering team gets overwhelmed, I see this with job transactions, right? You have jobs that have shipped already, but the transactions aren't appropriate. The materials haven't been issued or the labor hasn't been entered, shipments or receipts, stuff that happens physically. And now you're trying to catch that up in the system. Or inventory transfers. I've seen that happen where inventory transfers get way out of hand and now you're trying to figure out just where is everything. Now, again, there are probably some better ways to do some of these things inside of the system through cycle counting, year-end inventory, et cetera. But this is one option. And as I like to say there, you see at the bottom, when your data goes nuclear, and we blame the engineering, it's always due to bad bombs. All right, so speaking of bad, let's talk about that sheep out of the barn scenario. Now, I live in the sticks. I don't know if you know this. I live in Wisconsin, central Wisconsin, rural agricultural area. I have no idea how the Packers are doing. I'm still doing a little celebratory dance over the Milwaukee Bucks, mind you. But live in the sticks, and the farmers are out right now. Now all the fields have been mowed. They're here. The manure spreaders are out in full force doing their thing. And right now, the whole county smells just really tangy right now. I mean, you can almost taste it. But now that I've made you all jealous, let's jump into a real world kind of sheep out of the barn scenario and talk about how a problem can be correct both at the master file and the transactional file level when we're running into some data challenge. So I went and mocked up a situation here, a scenario where a finished good manufacturing part, BDF FG01, has a few mom issues. So it has a part material that's not linked to an operation, right? Good standard best practice. You want those parts linked to their operations. And two, the operation is linked to the wrong resource. So we need to change that operation so that it's linked to the right resource. So when we're scheduling, we can be scheduling against that appropriate resource. And the problem is active jobs already exist for this part, and some of those are released. So if you're thinking about an environment, I see this happen a lot where engineering fixes a problem, but because of backlog, because you have all these jobs that are out there that are still festering, those problems keep filtering in slowly in the shop saying, well, no, you haven't fixed the problem. I'm still seeing it. I told you about it Monday and I'm seeing it again on Friday. And the problem is, well, we changed the part master, so all future jobs will be fixed. But what about all these other things that are already out there? So this is kind of the scenario that I'm going to have us walk through and talk through today, and using DMT in a couple of different capacities to do that. So we're going to look at correcting part records, both on the routing and the BOM. We're going to be deleting unreleased jobs, wiping those out of the schedule. We'll be correcting and rescheduling some jobs that are already too far along to be deleted outright. And then we're going to recreate those jobs that we had whacked before. All right, so let's start with master file updates. So in this case here, we have a part that has some problems, and we're going to run two different updates. We're going to run the bill of materials update to correct the part material that's not related to the appropriate related operation. And we're going to correct the operation. Actually, we're going to be jumping to the part op details. So remember how you have part rev, and then part rev has part opper, and then part opper has a child table called part op detail. That's where the magic is to set that proper resource. So we're going to set it from one to another. And there's two different routines we're going to use there. One note on both of these is when you're doing this, you need to have your ECO group ID, because we're basically formulating a checkout of that product. I use DMT because I can't type to save my life. Okay, so let's first look at the problem before we run off fixing it. All right, so as I had said, I have this part, BDF FG01, and it has a couple of problems. So I'm going to look at its revision. We're going to jump into method tracker here very quickly. All right, so we'll look at the material problem here. Okay, classic problem. Material has no related operation. So in a complex scenario, that material's due date may not be appropriate relative to when it actually needs to be consumed. Real common. And when you're doing like a cutover load of your part master, your product master, you want to make sure that you load your operations before you load your materials, so those materials can link up to your operations appropriately. At the very least, get linked up to number 10 so they have something driving them. So that's the problem here that we're dealing with. And then the operation problem that I'm running into. So we look at this operation, and it has, for a scheduling resource, this resource called BDF01, and I want to change that to BDF02. So I'm going to run through the process now. I'll keep method tracker up so that we can see the results of this in real time. We'll jump into DMT. All right, so I have DMT up here, and I have a whole bunch of different routines open right now. And I'm going to start with the bill of materials update. So I have a single part that I'm going to be updating, single part material record. And as you can see, I am setting the related operation field. The rest of these fields here are all the necessary fields that Epicor needs to find this record and correct it. So I have, as you can see, probably 10 routines I'm going to try to run today. Well, fingers crossed that I can get through all of these without too many error messages. So I'm going to quickly kick this off and process it. And okay, great. Bill of materials results, nice little window comes up. One finished. So for DMT neophytes, the count number is the number that you're working through versus the number that you have to complete. The number of errors gets tallied below. If something blows up, that'll show up in this little helpful window here. You get an RPM count that's telling you how many records per minute you're doing. So for checking out a part and updating that operation, 26 makes sense. It's going to be a little slower than some other loads. You also have the ability to add, delete, or update. So in my case, I just check the update because I know the record exists there and I just want to find that thing and update it. So that being the case, why don't we jump in real quick and verify that the change occurred as intended. So we will refresh the screen here really quickly. And we will, also helps if I'm in the right forms. We come to here to method tracker. All right, so we come here. Uh-oh. Looks like we have our first problem. It did not update as intended. Let me just quickly check all those fails. I must have had. Oh, that's because I'm checking the operation, but I updated the material. Again, user error. Let's go to our materials now, and you can see that the material is now linked back to operation 10. So now operation 10 is the operation to which that material will be driven when MRP schedules it. So let's go ahead and do the next routine. Now I have the bill of operations update. Now this is one of those things I like to, when I'm using DMT, there's a couple of ways, there's tree views and such that you can navigate. I just like typing them up. The problem, of course, is if you type up routing, you won't find what you're looking for. You'll find something financial. I try to avoid finances whenever possible. So some of this is just remembering that if you're going to be loading a part bomb or a part boo, you need to start with bill, and then it'll take you there from that. All right, so that said, let me go ahead and run this bill of operations update. So as you can see here, I want to change, and I make sure, okay, I want to change that resource ID from BDF01 to BDF02. You'll notice here, this is a 2-table update. So when you're doing a bill of operations update, you need to get to the part op detail table by first getting to the part opera table. Now you'll see here, these are ECO offers, right? ECO is are the mirror records when the part is being engineered. Ultimately, when the thing gets checked in, it's committed back to the part opera. So my brain always goes straight to the part opera. So I talk in that terminology. So the goal here is to switch that from one to the other. So I will reload and we will update and process. Oh, I must have done this once before, so I'm just going to clear the existing log. And all is well here. Again, no error messages. So that tells me that the data would have gone in as intended. And I'll come back to method tracker and I'll jump down to my scheduling resources tab for my operations. And now you see BDF02 has been updated, which is a good thing. And we are off and running. So that's the simple part of correction of the part master records. And if we go ahead and we look at that part in question, and we refresh that, you'll notice that there are some new records being created to manage these changes that I have just made, which is nice. So now it keeps a track, a log of these changes coming in, coming out. That can be very helpful when you're trying to figure out just when did this thing change and why. DMT does allow for that logging to fall through, because you'd hate for that to be happening kind of behind in the, through one of the proverbial back doors. So that's helpful. All right. So that said, that's really as simple as this master file change needs to be. Biggest thing here was that we were doing a multi-table, and jump back here just for a quick second here, that the neat thing here is when you're doing a multi-table update, you have all the fields, all the key fields that got you to that parent record. You don't need to re-add those as part of the DMT run, because those can all apply now to this child. All you need is the related key. In this case, it's the op detail sequence will get you to that child record that you're looking to update. So it's a nice little way of bundling that. But once you get into a child table, and we'll talk a little bit about this again, you can see here, these are all parent table where you just have the field name. When you get to child tables, now you need to specify the parent and the child with the pound sign as the divider. So that's a little thing you need to do when you're working with a multi-table update. All right, so let's jump back to, okay, so we've talked about master file updates. Let's talk about transactional. So now this gets a little more dicey. Transactional files have a lot more corrections to do. And I will admit the last time I got involved with corrections, it involved several days in a padded cell, and I'd rather not go there. So when we talk about updating master files, that's one thing. It fixes problems for the future, but it doesn't make those instantaneous changes that are going to affect your shop floor immediately. And that's a problem. So let's talk about what we do to correct the bombs and routings of open jobs to make them right so that the shop sees that much quicker. Now, of course, you'll run into situations where you may, for something that's already been started or issued or what have you, some of that you might just choose not to include that in your update. And really, it was kind of ironic that Joe had a session here on BAQs, because a DMT expert is probably better at BAQs, because DMT is kind of pretty straightforward. The challenge most often is getting the right data that you can update without creating other problems, right? You don't want to be giving the shop too much of a moving target. And of course, you need to be thinking about if you're printing paperwork, if you're in a paperwork environment where you have job travelers and job pick lists and such, that if you've already printed those and sent them to the shop, a process step needs to happen to mop those up. That's kind of an ancillary consideration at this point. And then, yeah, as they say, everyone remembers the bombs, but nobody thinks about the booze. And after a year of consulting from my basement here with the pandemic, I think about the booze more and more. So let's talk about the jobs themselves. And yeah, let me run through this slide here, kill you with a PowerPoint before we do that. So we're going to run a series of updates. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to delete the jobs that have not been worked on. So we have a series of jobs. I've named them all smartly. You know, we say as consultants, we don't promote smart naming conventions. Then we do demos and everything's smartly named. Oh, well. So we have a BDF 06 to BDF 10. These are a bunch of jobs that I created through quick job entry, and we're going to whack those quickly and get them out of the way. So we're assuming those are jobs that were not yet transacted on, not yet released to the shop. And we can just whack them and recreate them later. So then we also have, we need to update the existing jobs that have been released to the shop. So this would be BDF 01 to BDF 05. We're going to run two routines again, one for the job material and one for the job operation. And similarly, the operation is actually going to update its child table job op detail. Then we're going to go and reschedule those jobs because Epicor holds that data in multiple places, and the actual shop schedule is not on the job. It's in this ancillary table. I think it's called resource time used table. What a strange name for a table. That's your scheduling table, but I'm not here to argue naming conventions. So we're going to run the scheduling engine and mop that up and then have a look. And then we're going to go ahead and create the new jobs through quick job entry as through DMT to build those back in together. Now, again, this might not be something you would do in a real world situation if MRP is running again at night, but I have customers who don't have MRP, so maybe they have value for kind of making that work. And so to do that, let me pull up my demo environment again. And so now we're going to start. So as I had noted, you can add, update, or delete records. So I have a family of jobs here that haven't been transacted on. I've set it to delete. I'm going to go ahead and process. And if all goes as planned, excellent. We have a whole suite of jobs that have been deleted now. Probably should have showed them to you before I actually went and deleted them, but never too late. Well, I guess in databases, sometimes it is too late, but it's never not always too late. I'm lousy at aphorisms. I apologize. Okay, so now we have 5 jobs here. These are the jobs that have been released to the schedule, as you can see, and they have the same problems as the parts, right? We're missing a related operation, and the operations themselves are scheduled against the wrong resource. And you can see here on the job, this BDF01 exists in 2 places. One is the job op detail record, and then one is the shop schedule or the resource time used record. You can see here in field help, it doesn't do a great job of telling you what actual table that is, but that's a different seminar. Okay, so we are going to go back to DMT and we are going to run through this process now. So I have these 5 jobs and I have a no related operation here. So what I probably should do before I do that is make sure that I get my proper related operation. All right, so we're going to relate everything to operation 10. Nice and simple. One thing too, when you're running DMT, this should be old hat for the experts out there, but for us novices, one thing that's very helpful is you can make change to your source table and then just reload and voila, now your related operation field has been found. So in this case, the company plant and the job number, the assembly sequence, the material sequence, the part number get you to that value that you need. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to run this as an update. You'll notice sometimes that process button grays out if something's not changed here, and you just have to hit the reload to get that button to be ready for prime time. So I will run that. Okay, everything looks good there. Jump back to the job here quickly and confirm that that worked as intended. So now we're expecting that value to be a ripe and rosy 10. Very good. So now we come back to our DMT and we work to our next activity, which is updating the job operation. So as you'll remember, we need to update the job op detail record to reference BDF02 instead of BDF01. So I'm going to not add new, I'm just going to update and I will process. All right, that happened quick. That's good. We'll open up the job entry screen now and go to operations, scheduling resource, and refresh. And now you see BDF02 is the scheduled scheduling resource, but it is not the scheduled resource. If you come here, you will notice the scheduled resource in the shop schedule is still BDF01. If you were looking at the schedule for a shop based on work queue or based on the resource scheduling board, this will fall under BDF01. Why is that? Well, the job has not been rescheduled, and it's the scheduling engine that runs and says, okay, this is my resource that I'm going to use. I need to schedule now and plug this into the shop schedule. So that is a separate step. And fortunately, DMT has the ability to schedule jobs. Now, this was something I just came in contact with myself kind of lately. I've been playing around with it. Clever little device. I mean, in the past, we've done silly stuff where you would create like an embedded customization that calls the scheduling engine and then iterates through a data set and does all that real finicky stuff. And it looks like, you know, based on the work that I've done lately, this looks like a pretty nice little tool. Again, this is a case where the fields you include are really important because a scheduling engine takes a bunch of different parameters. And those parameters, of course, will change how the thing works. So in my case, I'm back scheduling the first operation, operation 10. I've done this in multi-operation cases. And yeah, you schedule the first one, you back schedule it, and it'll reschedule everything else out. I think there's a setting there to do that as well. Don't have it on there, so it must be checked by default. I'm doing a couple of other things, right? I'm overriding material constraints. That's something you could do manually when you're checking a job. And I'm ignoring finite schedule. I'm setting an end date, right? So I'm scheduling, back scheduling from an end date, and it has to be a date time. That was one thing that smacked me when I first started playing with this. And from here, you need your job number, your assembly sequence, your operation sequence, and your op detail sequence. Once those are all known, you can go ahead and do what I'm going to do and process. Excellent. Okay, so that finished. No errors below, so we will jump back into that job and have a little look-see. So what I'm expecting is now this scheduled resource should be moved from BDF01 to BDF02. Great. So now we've not only changed that operations planned resource, but we've changed the scheduling as well. Maybe this is a nice way of thinking of it. Plan versus schedule. Your field here is your plan. This is actually what gets pulled into scheduling. Maybe a nice way of kind of dividing that just in terms of logistics. So that said, now that we've gone and done that, we're going to go ahead and create those other jobs that we had previously deleted. You know, one of the nice things here is that quick job entry can be front-ended by DMT, so you can do the same process. Normally, when you think of DMT, you're thinking that it's adding data, but really it's gotten to the point where it's so clever that it can be invoking processes. So you can be doing things like scheduling, or in this case, like quick job entry. So in my case, I'm going to create a bunch of jobs. As you can see, I'm going to engineer them. I'm going to give them a date against which to go. I'm going to schedule them, but I'm going to keep them unfirm. And I've specified the job numbers that I want. So again, you see the button there is grayed out. So I'm going to add new and kick off the process. Now this will go out and create some new jobs. Okay. And now when we come back, we should see 10 jobs for that same part instead of 5. All right, so we have 1 through 10. Okay, so 1, those are the ones that we've been looking at this whole time and updating and rescheduling. And now 10, these are those unfirm jobs now that have the materials and the operations. Now, because we made those changes to the part master, we should be able to come back here and expect that the material will be properly related to the related operation, and that B, this operation now should be scheduled against BDF02 instead of BDF01. So excellent, we have success there. So those steps now, we've walked through all of those and successfully made the changes that are needed. Now, I guess there are probably a couple of other, similar type scenarios that have master file scenarios and then implications. I had some really nasty ones where engineering was making part number changes, where this part's no longer called this, it's called that, and you need to swap it out. And this is a part that could be sold as a spare part, it could be held in inventory, it could be on job bills, materials, it just becomes a nightmare to change. So you end up having to go through a real complex process of kind of checklisting all the things. Do I have open allocations for this part? Do I have open inventory? Do I have any buy to order, like on the sales order? Those are can be a problem? Do I have stuff that's out on purchase orders? Do I have stuff that's out on subcontract? Do I have stuff that's on jobs? So making a change becomes a much more exhaustive and kind of full company-wide activity. I thought about doing that one for this demo, but given the number of steps in my penchant for talking and blabbing, I had a feeling we wouldn't make the due date here. So really, I would say that's kind of the key here, is understanding all the steps you need to do. Once you've done them, DMT does, as you can see, have a bunch of very nice, helpful components to make that work. Let's talk about a couple more things here while we're at it. Multi-table updates. We'll talk about this just a little more because this is fun. So when you have multi-tables, and you can kind of skin this cat in a couple of different ways, right? So if you're looking at updating multiple tables, you could say, for instance, you have a part and a part plant, right? If you have a part record, you could run a DMT update to create the parts, and then you could come back and run a secondary update to update the part plant records and do your things there. Now, remember, this is part plant are like kissing cousins, but bitter enemies at the same time, because it's very easy for the data to get out of sync. And sometimes that's by design and sometimes that's by accident. So if you're looking at your part screen and thinking everything's right, and really Epicore's driving everything off of that nefarious little part plant record, you can see that. So sometimes it's helpful to do a multi-table update. So you create everything at once, and then you don't have to bother with this update, then that update. And I'm thinking of 3 key places where this is really common. So we talk about part plant, also part warehouse gets created when you create a part plant by default functionality. So you have to go back and mop that thing up. Now, similarly, when you create a sales order line or a purchase order line, there's a release line that also gets created no matter what. And it might get created with settings that you don't want to use. So you need to come back and do it. So these multi-table updates are really helpful to do that. So, I got ahead of myself. So DMT allows for some of that. So one of the examples is the part combined DMT routine. It creates a part plant, a part rev, and a part warehouse. It's like two times the fun. So what we'll do there, and I should probably note here before we jump into the demo, is child tables can be identified using the child name hashtag child field name convention. So for example, part plant hashtag minimum quantity. And for our demos here, I'm going to do 2 actually. I'm going to do the part combined DMT to create a bunch of those part records. But then there's another one that's the part revision, where you can create the part rev, and there's a child table that you don't always think of. I was showing it to you an example, the part audit records, so that you can specify some audit comments, which can be helpful. So let's have a look at DMT. So what I'm doing here was I have the part combined source. And so what I did was I liked that part I had made so much, I decided I was going to make another 9 of them. Okay, so I'm making that same finished good, and I'm going to create it at the part level. I'm also going to create the plant record and assign a couple of plant items, the minimum quantity and the days of supply. I love days of supply for some reason, my favorite go-to field. And I'm going to add a revision right away. So I'm going to give it a revision ID and a revision short description. And I'm going to give it a part warehouse record as well. So we're going to create 4 for the price of 1. And so now we're going to add new, since we're adding new, and we're going to kick off the process. And now it will think and it'll start doing. All right, very good. So do a little testing here. When we come back, we're going to be looking for days of supply of 14, minimum on-hand quantity of 10. We jump back into our part maintenance screen. And let's find BDF FG02. Oh, already. Oh, you're mad at me because you think I'm. Let's just do this. Clear out and start over. Turn it off and back on. IT answer. Okay, so we have all those fields that I had set there, the class and the group. It's a manufactured part. I had set that. Everything else pretty much defaulted other than the part and the description. Came through with a revision. Okay, an unapproved revision, mind you, with the revision ID and the rev short description. And then we go to the sites tab. We see here we have a minimum on hand of 10. And then at the planning factors, we have a days of supply of 14. So nice. We bundled that thing together, laid it out, and it made a nice bunch of updates for us. Now, I've seen some cases where I've run into many to one challenges, and I'm not sure if that was my user problems, my limits to my IQ and bandwidth of brain, or if it had to do with a software limitation or a limitation of the version. I've seen some of that where you try to create, say, multiple plant records for a single part in this update. Sometimes it balks at that. Could just be that I was missing some fields and such. Be curious if anybody else has seen that or if they've circumvented that in one format or another. All right, so that was the part combined. Now let's talk about one last thing we will do here is we will talk about the part revision load. Okay, so nice thing about part revision load, and you'll see this if you've tried to approve part revisions through DMT without including the part audit table, the system smacks you, say audit change description required if you're going to approve this thing. Now, it's not required if you're doing a part hopper or a part material update for some reason. When you do that, it gets in, it gets out, it plugs in a generic bit of information into the audit table, and it's off and running. But if you want to unapprove and reapprove a part on your own, it's going to demand this extra information. So I went ahead and said, okay, I have a part here, my BDF FG01. I'm going to create some more revisions for that. I'm going to approve them, and they're going to be effective kind of out into the future. So I'm going to go ahead and add these as new records and then kick that process off. Okay, so that ran as intended. Now we'll go back to the part maintenance screen. I'll come back to. All right, we'll look here, just expanding my tree view. Now, instead of one revision, I have many. And if I look here, okay, oh, interesting. All right, so you can see here, it was spooky, and I'm going out for Halloween as the Wolfman this year, so I was in an owl mood. Christmas comes around, and I'm very festive, and then and this is interesting that some of the components, it's balking at you, so it matches those dates of components. That's an interesting little piece here. And then I set this out for a year from now, and yes, DMT is very spooky. Anytime that you're doing that kind of black magic, you can get kind of Gandalf level off from your associates. So that's a good thing always. All right, so if we're talking about table updates, I think we've covered all the biggies here. Child name, field name, as the convention, and there are probably a couple other places where I've done this in the past. I think sales order updates is a good one. One challenge, of course, is everybody wants to explicitly set the indexed fields like sales order number, right? I want to load 10 sales orders, but instead of going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in terms of the line nums, I want it to be 1, 3, 7, 22. DMT doesn't allow for that. You can plug it in, but it's going to ignore it. And say, no, I think it should be numbered this. So when you see conversion cases, when people are converting records for a go live, what I see most often is they'll load the full number of lines so everything gets spaced out as intended, and then they'll come back and either delete those lines or close those lines or do something like that to mop those out so that you have all the live lines, but they map back to the original. Your other option, of course, is create a spreadsheet that has kind of a cross-reference between old record and new record, because you can load the same PO number, for instance, but PO line 1 might have been PO line 3 in the previous system, and then you create a spreadsheet that cross-references those, and you use that for a week or two while all those transactional records flush themselves out. So I've seen that as a pretty common way of addressing that. One last thing here, I see I have a little bit of time, so I'll do a little bit of rabbit holing here because it's fun. So one thing that's really interesting is how when you're working through the BO, Epicor has calculated fields. Of course, they're not fields that are held in the database, but they're fields that are calculated as a result of other things. And these are kind of bidirectional, right? There'll be something like on a sales order entry, you'll get some sort of total inventory number or whatever calculated and presented to you for a given part of your total available amount. And that's not held anywhere in the database. It's summed up from a couple of other locations. You have fields that go the other way where Epicor will take a value, and then it'll plug it in different places. It'll separate them in other places. There was a demo I wanted to put together, didn't have the time, I'm afraid, for loading serial numbers on the part master. So it's real interesting. I think I might have written a blog about it, where you have the serial number values on the part master, a whole bunch of different fields. But when you're entering them as an end user, you only have 3 fields. It's stored as 5, but it's entered as 3. And sure enough, when DMT, they have those calculated fields available for you so that you can enter those values and have DMT do the rest. It's pretty clever. And there is one more that I like to think about here. And let's jump into, if I still have method tracker. And this is my favorite example, final operation. So we come here and we have this flag, final operation. So if we come to help, field help, and we pull this up, they got a nice large description telling you everything you need to know about it. But more importantly, in the technical details section, all right, it's plugged in as final oper, but it has no database field. So that's kind of interesting. Okay, so what you find is that that value is actually stored in the database on the part revision field, whereas you're entering it through the part oper. So if we come into DMT, and let's do bill of operations, and I'm going to use the little template builder. This is kind of just a fun little thing. I probably should have mentioned that. There's a couple of ways to figure out what fields you need to include when you're doing a DMT. One is to hit the required button, and they'll tell you a bunch of things. They're not always honest. And there are plenty of times where, and DMT is kind of funny the way it'll correct you. Sometimes it'll tell you there. And then sometimes it'll let you load your template, and when you load the template, it'll say that you're missing something. And then sometimes it'll wait for you actually to hit the process button and try to kick it off. And then it'll tell you when you see all your records failing because you're missing a value. DMT kind of likes to do that just to keep you on your toes and necessitate that you find consultants like me to help you out. Fortunately, they have this nice little cancel button here. So if you see things getting off the rails, proverbially, you can proverbial nip that one in the bud. But let's go ahead and look at the other tool, which is template builder. So this is a nice tool here they have, and this is the full collection of database and calculated fields that you can use in a load. And so we are in the part oper, so you have final oper. Okay, so final oper, it's a Boolean field. This isn't a real database field. You can load it in here and it'll write to the part revision table and set that for you. How clever. Now let's look at part revision. And helps if I put in a space, part revision, not restriction or division. All right. And we do the same game here, and we pull up the template builder and we look at final oper. There it is again. So if you are masochistic and you want to try to update the same data from multiple places, you can do this. You can update the final oper on that part rev. So here, final oper is an int. So you're saying that this oper, op sequence 20 or op sequence 40, is the final oper for this revision level. If you're doing it through the bill of operations load, it's a Boolean. So you're just saying this record, this operation record, which has its op sequence, of course, is the final operation. It all hits the database ultimately in the same place, but Epicore, as always, Epicore wouldn't be Epicore if they didn't give you 3 different ways to solve the same problem. So if nothing else, that keeps you busy on a Friday night. Instead of going off and having fun, you could be figuring out multiple ways to update the same field. So glad I was able to slip that in, and I see that I'm running out of time here. So I am going to turn it over for any questions. And if we are done after that, then we might let you out all a little early today.
So Brad, we're going to have pity on you since you've been trapped in that basement for so long. We do have a question.
Excellent.
And this is regarding a customer who has their Epicor on a public cloud, SaaS. They have an issue when sales selects the incorrect unit of measure, and they need to change them on existing jobs. Right now, they have to go through the formal process of requesting it, and that can take quite a while, maybe 24 hours or so. Is there a way that DMT or any other method would allow them to directly update the unit of measure on existing jobs.
Existing job. So let me throw up a big caveat, because UOMs is its own ugly rabbit hole you could go down to, assuming that you're still within the same UOM class and that they entered the wrong UOM class that you wanted there. That should be very doable. If you're working across UOM classes, it could be more of a finagle, because changing UOMs can be quite often a real labor of love. So if it's as simple as going to the job header and changing it there, yeah, have you tried to do it through DMT already? I guess would be my one question, because I would certainly give that a shot, because I believe you can change the UOM on the sales order. I believe they give you that availability there when you're checking that. So yeah, that would be, I would say that would be my first try, would be to see if you could get those synced up in that way. You could also try an updatable BAQ, but really, I haven't seen a lot of cases where you get the same problem either way, because of course they're using that same update EXT method underneath them. So I think that might be, you might be kind of stuck either way. And I'm not going to recommend anybody touch the SQL database, because someone's going to come off and club me even in my basement. So.
All right. That was the only question I have, unless Cindy knows of some more.
Sorry about that. Nope, I believe that covers it.
All right. We're really close to wrapping up on time, and maybe a moment early.
Oh, one real quick, and sorry if this was, did you already answer Rosier's question?
Yes.
Rob, yes, okay, just making sure everything got answered in that. Then yes, we're done.
All right, well, very good then. Well, folks, I think that means we've completed our summit here today. I want to thank everyone who stuck it out through the end. As Rob had mentioned, we'll be handing out some prizes for folks who stuck with us to the end. We'll do a random drawing here and reach out to you from there. Other than Cindy, Rob, I just want to thank you myself for attending this and sitting through this with us. This was a lot of fun, and I hope you left with some value, and would love to talk to you further if you have any needs going forward. So thank you again. Have a very fine weekend and a very happy Halloween.
Thank you all for coming. And we'll be reaching out with those recordings. I know some of you might just want one session. So I think we'll be able to break that up for you, but just wanted to let you know, we will definitely be keeping you guys in the loop for that.
All right. Thank you all. This is Daryl. Have a fantastic afternoon. See you next time.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, folks.